All right, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our annual, not necessarily annual, because we missed 2 years now, annual Wealth Management Planning Summit. I'm Greg Porter. I'm one of the managing directors, CBIZ Berntson Porter. Excited to kick off this year's summit. We got a great, outstanding group of speakers today. I mean, some of the best in the business. And we're going to be talking about wills, will being wealth, investments, legacy, and longevity. Or when we talk about longevity, we're going to be talking a lot about health. We're going to hear from our keynote speakers, Naveen Jain. He's going to take us through how the pandemic has impacted our health, and he's revolutionizing his approach to disease. And they've achieved a 30% improvement in depression, diabetes, and IBS after just 4 months. I have no idea what IBS is. I don't know if any.
We'll get into that.
Well, if you're Russian, it's intercontinental ballistic systems. 25 of you are going to be lucky enough to receive the Viome kit that tests these results, and you can learn a lot about yourself by doing that. So to do that, make sure you throw in a business card outside, right at that outside table. There's a glass bucket there, and just throw it in there, and we'll pick it after this event. We'll pick it and then notify you, and you'll get your kit. It's pretty cool. So I'd like to start by thanking Terry Cook, Managing Director, Parsion Wealth Management, Lori Baldavia, the Chief Operating Officer, Assured Partners. They've been our partners doing this forever. We have a lot of common clients between the groups. And we're honored to have, whether you're a client of ours or theirs or all of ours, we're just honored to have you in the audience today. So again, thank you all for coming. We're honored again to have you here. I'm going to turn this part of the program over to Terry at Parsion. So thank you, Terry.
Great to see everybody here. Great to see all these faces. You're not on like a Zoom screen and whatnot. So I appreciate you making the efforts to come. I'm going to ask John and Pam to come on up here, and then I'll frame this up while they're getting settled in here. And to frame this up, studies have shown that over 70% of business owners, when they, within a year of selling their company, regret the decision to sell. We've seen similar things from folks after a successful career when they retire. This sense of regret, and there's probably lots of reasons for this. We're going to explore some of that now. What inevitably comes up as one of the most kind of underappreciated aspects of all that is just when you retire or you leave behind a company that you built, then it becomes time to find your new sense of purpose, and maybe even new community around you. And so I think that's really underappreciated. Another aspect that is concerns, I know, to a lot of the clients and the families that we serve is how does the wealth affect our kids? Does it disincent them? And how do we avoid that, the typical trust fund kids? So we're extremely fortunate to have these two individuals up here who've not only had enormously successful careers, but have given significant thought to what their purpose and legacy looks like as they pivot their careers to what's next. Understanding that the right approach is very personalized, I'm grateful for Pam and for John to help us all with this discussion here. I told Pam I was going to embarrass her a little bit here, and I'll do the same with John. I know Greg said we're not going to do long introductions, but these two definitely deserve it. So I'll read quick here. Pam Lopker is the founder of QAD, a global software company focused on the needs of global manufacturing enterprises. She founded QAD in 1979 after her college boyfriend, who later became her husband, Carl Lopker, asked her to help find manufacturing software for his leather sandal company. Apparently, she couldn't find the right software, so she built it, and that became QAD. She took QAD public in 1997 and ran it until its recent acquisition by private equity company Thoma Bravo here this last year. Pam's long been recognized by her entrepreneurialism and leadership in the advancement of manufacturing software. She's a strong advocate and supporter of women in technology, was named by Fortune magazine as a hero in US manufacturing, and was on the cover of Forbes magazine in 1996 as America's most successful self-made woman, a list that she has been on as recently as last year. Pam's husband now, Carl, who she married after, I guess because you solved all of his problems, he eventually sold his sandal company, Decker's Outdoor, and helped Pam run QAD until he sadly lost his battle with cancer in 2018. She's the mother of Bo and Juliana, who have both gone on to be successful entrepreneurs themselves. And besides continuing on the board of QAD, she's the president of the Lopker Family Foundation, which I'll have her talk about here in a little bit. John on my left here is managing partner of Ignition, an early stage enterprise software venture capital firm. He joined Ignition in 2005 after 16 years with Microsoft. The last 5 as Microsoft's chief financial officer. He also served as vice president of the Worldwide Enterprise Group and vice president and chief information officer. A member of the board of directors for, get this right, Carbon Robotics, Tempered Networks, Icertis, Cement, knew I was going to mess that up, and Tractable. Nailed that one, though. And in the past has sit on the boards of publicly traded Splunk Software and Nike. Hailing from the thriving metropolis of Miles City in eastern Montana, one of 7 kids from an Irish family. John and his wife have 4 successful children and are avid philanthropists and mentors focusing their efforts in youth education, faith communities, and free market think tanks. I thank you both for joining today. And we'll get right into it because there's lots to cover here. But I'll start with you, Pam. Take us back to the 70s. You know, Carl asked you for help with his sandals company. It's a great story. And you started in growing QAD. What was the opportunity you saw at the time in the market?
Thanks, Terry. I graduated from college with actually a BS mathematics, but in my last couple of years decided I really needed a trade, and that trade became computer science. So I took a lot of classes, ended up as a software developer. After 3 years, I noticed the company I was working for, which was a small Southern California software company, they looked at their mission as being software developers, and they would write software for anyone that needed software. So whether it was a dentist office, a dry cleaners, a restaurant, a distributor, a manufacturing concern, I quickly rose to be the head of development of all of 10 people. So not a big position, but anyway, important position. Mm-hmm. My job was to create software documents that people would then write software for. And we just could not keep up with the demand from these diverse customers. So I thought if we could just verticalize, if we could just choose one industry and really understand that industry, become experts in that industry, and write software for them that we would keep developing. Certainly, Carl's company, Decker's, became my first customer, which was great to have that initial customer. But I got to tell you, they never paid. They thought that I should be appreciative of their, using the software, that they didn't really need to pay for it. So that really became the catalyst, that became the idea, that became the catalyst. And still to this day, QAD focuses on global manufacturing companies. So
started in 1979, ran it for 40 plus years. Yeah. What a massive decision. What led you to sell?
I think that, getting to my age, let me see, I think I know how old I am, 67. It had to happen at some point. I couldn't just keep running it. I did think for a while that I would just step to the chairman of the board and leave the company going, but I didn't feel quite comfortable with that. So I thought bringing in a PE company. I still own a quarter of the company, and when I left, I owned 47% economic value, 70% control value. So I'm still very involved in the company on the board, but I thought they would be helpful in helping the company get to where really they should be in both an EBITDA as well as a growth track. So it was a decision that I didn't take lightly, and it is a painful transition in many ways, but I still think it's the right thing.
And with that, no longer day-to-day responsibilities, you're on the board. How do you pivot to your new focus and attention now?
Well, I think because my husband's illness, he had stage 4 prostate cancer for over 13 years when he died in 2018. I'd studied cancer, and we had learned so much about how to live a healthy, happy life, even in the face of cancer. I thought, wow, if we could take our foundation, and with the sale of half my ownership, I was able to fund the foundation. I think we're almost to $100 million if he does a good job for me.
It's better today.
Oh, good. Yeah. Thanks. I could make a difference to focus on bringing new therapies to market faster, because it's very, very slow process. I've loved education. I really also wanted to focus on education, but I decided to just focus 100% on cancer, at least for the next few years, and hope to advance some therapies and save lives.
That's fantastic, and love the focus and the impact that could bring. John, Miles City, Montana. One of 7 kids. Father was a teacher and coach. Mm-hmm. Mother worked for the newspaper as a reporter. Not necessarily just in distance, but it's a long ways away from running the finance department for the world's most powerful software company. Mm-hmm. Talk about how growing up in eastern Montana got you to where you are.
Yeah, well, I look back, and it was. For those old enough in the audience to know who Norman Rockwell was, it was kind of a Rockwellian place. It was fantastic. Miles City was founded by Texas cattlemen in eastern Montana, and it's about 80 miles from where Custer got it at the Little Bighorn. So once Custer got it, the Army built a fort, and then from there Miles City grew. And these Texas cattlemen moved big herds of livestock north to that area, because as long as it gets its 13 inches of rain a year, it's got fantastic grass for livestock. And for those of you that are familiar with the book Lonesome Dove, that cattle drive, the end destination of the cattle drive was Miles City, Montana. So it was a big cattle and horse raising region. Once the Jeep was invented in 1945, the horse raising died off because armies didn't need horses anymore, they used Jeeps. But the cattle industry was big, so my father was the son of an Irish immigrant who'd immigrated to Butte, Montana, and so my grandfather was an underground copper miner, and my dad followed the typical first generation, go to college, and he became a coach. And he coached at this Catholic high school at a time when Catholics had giant families. Ours was 7 kids. I don't even think we were below the median, probably. But anyway, my dad coached all these farm and ranch kids, and so in the summer I worked on big wheat operations or big remote cattle ranches, and then everybody knew who Dan Connors was, so I could always get a job. In the summer I worked on the Burlington Northern on a tie gang, replacing railroad ties 2 summers. I worked 1 summer in the oil field in eastern Montana and western North Dakota that's now known as the Bakken. Mm-hmm. So I knew how to work, and I knew how to work with tough people. Whether it was the farmers, the ranchers, the crews on the Burlington Northern Railroad, the oil field crews, these were people that worked really hard, and they were tough. And so I went to college at Montana thinking I wanted to be a lawyer. Thank God I didn't do that. Became an accountant instead, and moved out here and went to work for Deloitte Haskins and Sells. And fortunately, one of the very first people I met at Deloitte was a guy named Rick Devenuti, who's in the audience here. And Rick is a friend and client of Terry's. And Rick and I have remained friends to this day. And Rick was my first boss at Microsoft, hired me into the finance group. And I think it was actually not a hard transition for young people that wanted to work really hard and could deal with abuse of, it wasn't the nicest environment in the world in the 80s and 90s. So you had to put up, you had to work really hard, and you had to be able to fight back, I think is probably a way to describe what working at Microsoft in the early days was. And because it was growing so much, there were lots of opportunities to keep moving up as long as you stuck around,
right.
Or didn't get fired or quit or whatever. So it was just a natural environment for hardworking people, and it was just a heck of a lot of fun because it was growing so fast.
That's great. I just decided to send my sons from West Bellevue to East Montana to work in the summers now. That's solved my concerns. So you've made a couple transitions in your career. So the transition from Microsoft to Ignition, tech industry, but very different. And then now you're making that transition as your glide path from Ignition to your next focus. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you've approached that?
Yes, so the move from Microsoft to Ignition, I knew some of the principles that were starting Ignition in 2000, and I thought at the time, late 99, about joining them, but I couldn't because of the role I was needing to assume at Microsoft in a tumultuous time for the company, and so I couldn't really leave then. But I stayed in touch with the team, and then by about late 2004, early 2005, or late 2000, early 2004 to late 2004, my wife and I had 4 kids. I had been working hard for a long time. I don't know, Rick. There's a few other Microsoft folks in here I think I recognize, but it was kind of a 60 to 70 hour work week for a long time. A long time, 14, 15 years. And our 2 older boys, I just wasn't around as much as I wanted to be with our 2 younger kids. That was the motivation number one. I wanted more time with the 2 younger kids than I'd had with the 2 older. Secondly, I wanted to get a chance to get involved in more community things. And thirdly, I thought it'd be interesting to work with early stage companies. Had no idea what it would be like, if I'd be any good at it, but that was the motivation. And oh my gosh, it has been so much fun to work with entrepreneurs in early stage companies. I don't think it really matters what the industry is. It takes a unique type of person and unique teams to start something and build it. It's so dang hard. It is so dang hard. It doesn't matter what the industry is. And I love the optimism, I love the perseverance, I love the pioneering spirit, the way you get teams to work. The other thing about it is with small things, if the team doesn't work, it's an absolute disaster. If there's a little bit of smoke of a problem, by the time you dig in, it's just like a disaster. And big companies can handle dysfunction better and longer than small companies. So that there's a lot of volatility, which I love. Then when I was getting close to turning 60, and then when I turned 60, I'm 63 now, it was real obvious I didn't want to do another fund with Ignition as a general partner because it's a long-term commit. And to give you an example, the Ignition was a very early investor, first investor in DocuSign. It was 14 years before that went public. That was a long time for a company, but the life of these funds is 10 years, you're going to be with them longer. Mm-hmm. And I knew I couldn't commit to investors. I'd be a full-time key man GP for a fund. So there were a couple of young guys that worked with me that are just exceptionally talented. They wanted to start a firm. They've done that. I think Fuse.vc. I'm an advisor to Fuse, not a general partner. It's just so dang fun working with them. And then we still have in ignition probably 13 companies that we're continuing to manage over the next probably 7 to 8 years. There will still be some involvement. Some of those will be around that long. But we had to start figuring out, what do you do with the rest of your life? And I don't know, for those in the audience that are 60 or more, I didn't think that much about mortality and how many years do you have left till I hit 60. And then it was like, wow, I'm thinking about this a lot, that I better get going. And then my wife turned 60 18, 24 months later, and she's like, okay, now I get why you were talking about it. So we really started to think, okay, we either have to hire people to start working with us on things, or our children have to be involved, or some combination. So the first thing we did was really sit down and figure out with the kids, what did they want to be involved in our family stuff or not? And it was kind of a binary decision, yes or no. And then what areas would they want to be involved in? And that's where we are now.
That's where we found that.
Yeah.
And Pam, I mentioned earlier that a lot of business owners struggle with finding purpose and even community, when they retire, when they sell their company or whatnot. How have you thought about that or approached that?
I'd say it was a difficult transition, but I had already started changing my focus from day-to-day operations at QAD to cancer research over the year, and it was something I wanted to do more of. I wanted to be more involved. I want to see what I could do. But it is completely different when you're running a company. The emails and the phones are ringing, and you're really in a lot of reactive mode. And starting off again in the foundation, it's like, okay, what do we do today? Who do we want to talk to? We got to set up calls. You got to set up schedules. So it's back to almost like early days starting the company, where nobody's calling you. You've got to call them, and you've got to be proactive about what you do during the day. So the day does seem a bit slower, but it's still very exciting. I'm happy to be doing it.
And you and Carl had always been philanthropic. How has your philanthropy evolved over the years to kind of where your focus is now?
Yeah, certainly 20, 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, we decided let's give 20% of our income away. So let's just, every year, how much did we make? Let's take 20% and let's give that away. And at that point, it was mostly, in the beginning, it was mostly local community, it was schools, it was, actually we decided we'd focus on technology in schools, so building data centers, internet, wiring stuff. People from QAD would get involved because we could provide value. What is it that you need? Let us review that stuff. Do you really need Apple? Maybe you want Microsoft. Oh, I know, Linux. But we would review that, and we would do that, and that was quite rewarding. We would get our kids involved in that. They would help decide who we're going to give to and how much to each entity. Since then, I changed to this cancer research and being much more involved in it. But it's been quite rewarding for forever doing donations and getting involved in needs.
I think it's interesting how you're approaching alternative cures for cancer, and you're seeking out to just gather as much information as possible.
Right. Yeah, what we noticed through my husband's cancer journey, there's always like, oh, you have to do chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is brutal. And there's so many complementary things you can do to make it more effective, to make it less brutal on your body. And those things are not normally talked about. It's always the cure, not the journey. So there is many things that can help not only reduce the cancer, but to make the treatments more palatable. And yet they don't get much airtime because they haven't been through a clinical trial. Regular oncologists say, show me the study, show me where it's been, where it's been written up in a big magazine. So if we can bring a few of those capabilities to market with that kind of clinical trial review, I think it would be a nice benefit for all cancer patients.
Absolutely. John, you grew up son of a coach, and obviously that carried through to you, because I know you're a big mentor. I mean, mentorship is really important, and that's how you operate, whether it's mentoring young entrepreneurs through Ignition or through the next group with Fuse. And then can you also talk about your own philanthropy and how you address that?
Yeah, so I think God's just put a lot of these young guys in my life to be involved with, whether it's sports, business, just young guys I meet. And that's kind of my discipleship and my mentorship, is I try to do a lot of that. And then through sports, I love sports, and I'm a big believer in what sports does for kids and how they learn perseverance and teamwork and sacrifice and showing up on time. And somebody gets hurt, the next person's got to play. And so we've done a lot of work that is both mentorship and philanthropy in the sports world. Some of it is nonprofit. Some of it is probably best described as not for zero profit, meaning it's supposed to be a profit-making business, but they, usually doesn't make much profit. But the goal is a profit in sports. And what we've really tried to do is find who are the people in our lives that we've met that are multipliers, that is, they are able to find and attract people to make a big difference in more people's lives than, the way I think of it is 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. And so our boys were real fortunate. They had a coach at Bellevue High School, Butch Goncharoff, who's just a remarkable, remarkable man. And he's now working with two of our sons are real involved in inner city youth football. And kind of the way it works is these coaches reach out to Butch to help develop their programs and coach their coaches. And it's just really grown. And then we buy the equipment. Football's an expensive sport. But we've got teams now in Crenshaw, Compton, Watts, Victorville, one to get started in Fresno. We've got a Seattle program that's starting up here this fall, Dallas, Houston, Austin. We're probably going to now have some teams in Atlanta, since one of our sons who's involved is there. And what our goal there is to have great men in these boys' lives, many of whom don't have a father figure that is as present as maybe these kids would need or like. And then another son is working on how do we figure out where these boys are academically with an assessment and of where they are academically, where they need to go, but then use the network that we have as a family and friends to start making these kids aware of all the opportunities that are out there for them mostly in the business world. And so, that's an example in sport. We met this wonderful gal from our neighborhood. She actually was tutoring one of our sons in Spanish, and super bright gal, I think she went to Yale, and then she worked at Boston Consulting Group, Paloma Pineda. Now she's Paloma Schuckart or something. She married some German guy. I think that's how you say his last name. But anyway, wonderful, brilliant lady, and she and a gal she'd met from London had this idea of incubating an apparel business in Ghana. And so we're the first backers of that, and I think they're now up to 1,000 employees, and we're starting to get brands that we'd all recognize here as customers as opposed to dog beds and Refrigiware was the first products they made. But Paloma's a multiplier. So in each of these areas, Terry, what we're trying to do across, faith institutions, faith-based institutions, family institutions, and then football and/or sport, because now we have some granddaughters, so I think we'll probably be getting into non-football sports as we go. We're trying to find people that are those that really make a difference. Then we're also now looking for investments we can get involved in, particularly in Montana, that provide a working class wage. So in Montana, that's $25 or more plus benefits. And it's amazing how many things crop up, everything from artisanal furniture makers to an outdoor adventure type business. So we're trying to find people that can make a big difference that you can bank on. Yeah. And it's not a lot different than when you're backing a company. You're backing a team and a leader that you believe in that'll figure it out and get it done. We're trying to do the same things in this new chapter of our lives.
That's fantastic. The multiplier effect really resonates. I know it resonates with everybody in this room, a lot of entrepreneurs in this room, and it's similar to, it is, another example is the microfinance organizations around the world, in the developing countries especially. Yeah. So the whole teach them how to fish theory. So pivoting just a little bit, because both of you have been, for years, involved the next generation in your philanthropy and discussions around that and whatnot, and as I know, they're involved now. When I talk about shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, if some of you have heard about that, and the data shows us that after the first generation, 70% of a family's wealth is gone. And after the next generation, it's 90% is gone. And studies have shown that about 85% of the reason for that is communication and education and preparation of the next generation. And I've talked to both of you, and I know you've in your own way, have done a particularly good job at this. So maybe you can talk about how you've addressed that. And I know maybe it's not with that in mind, but it's worked out that way.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say why my kids are successful. I can say what we did, which we think made a difference. And I think the first thing that we feel was of great value years ago when the kids were very little. They're only 18 months apart, so we could do the same thing at the same time. But a Mormon friend explained to me that the way the Mormons teach is that every family member should have an allowance, and that should be independent of any kind of jobs, getting paid for any kind of jobs. Then they have jobs because they're part of the family, but those two things are independent. So we started when they were about 4 and 5. We gave them $5 a week each for an allowance, and for that, they could never ask anymore, buy me this, buy me that, which was a persistent thing. Anytime you took them to the store, there's something they wanted, whether it was a balloon or a candy bar or whatever it was. And I think that was a huge thing for them. We saw them not only saving their money, but a particular time that stands out, they wanted to buy a magic kit. Magic kit was $10. They were negotiating if they're each going to pay $5 each. They decided my daughter should pay $4 and my son should pay $6 because they knew he was going to use it more. That was fine. They went up to cash register together to buy it. It actually turned out to be $10.60 because there was 60 cents worth of tax. My son said, "We don't want the tax, you can keep it." And
lesson learned.
The cashier tried to explain to him that he had to pay that. And then they both looked at each other, talked a little bit and said, "We're not buying it. We're not buying it. It's not worth $10.60. It's only worth $10. And I thought that was a really valuable lesson, not only them negotiating together, but pulling their money, but realizing what something it costs. And we carried that through the years. By the time they're in middle school, they were getting a couple $100 a month each, and they had to start buying their own clothes. And it was interesting to see. My son bought a lot of duct tape, and his shoes were duct taped together because he needed new computer equipment. Our daughter was very thrifty, not only buying stuff on sale, she started a clothes exchange party with her friends where they'd all bring the clothes they didn't want, and they would just exchange clothes instead of buying new clothes. So I thought that was quite innovative on both of theirs, and we resisted buying my son new clothes and new shoes until Christmas time, when we said, okay, that could be a present, because he had to manage his own clothing. By college, by high school, we actually gave them each a $50,000 investment fund, and they could manage and invest in stock. My daughter was certain that Disney was going to take off, and kids love Disney. My son was very into AMD. AMD is where it's going to take off. I think he was 20 years too early, but it did finally. They both lost some money and realized, we don't want to do this. Well, I've lost $2,000, and decided to turn it over to professional management. So I thought they then hired wealth managers to look after their money. By college, instead of paying for everything, we said, well, the school says that you need this kind of budget. So every semester we'd say, here's your money for the semester. You make sure you pay your tuition first. And they managed their own money through college. And then after college, we gave them each a $700,000 fund. Amount of money to manage, and they had already learned that professional wealth management was probably a better idea.
I did not tell her to say that at all. That's totally organic.
So we think that they learned early on to manage money and to budget, and that was very important, and to be self-sustaining, then also to manage wealth. We also involved them in who to donate for, what would be the best way to provide a donation to a school. And today they each have about $30 million each that they manage. And they really, I think my daughter, when she was starting her company, lived off about $50,000 or $60,000 worth of dividends, but they have not touched their money. They look at it as it's their responsibility to manage that money, invest it wisely, and to have it for the next generation, which, by the way, there has been no third generation yet. We're still waiting. We're grandparent in waiting here if you have any that you want to donate. But I think all that kind of played into their, besides, making them, get straight A's and whipping them if they didn't.
Yeah, you can't do anymore. The duct tape is particularly interesting. I'm going to invest in that. And before we open it up to the audience for questions, why don't you talk about how you incorporated your kids into the process?
Yeah, we didn't really, I don't know if we just winged it, but in hindsight, there were a few things. First of all, my wife, Kathy, was, she was a stickler for manners. When those kids, from the time they were 1, 2 years old, it was please and thank you, and yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. So they learned manners and respect from my little 5'2" wife, and they were terrified when she'd get mad. So they learned to be respectful and have manners. Secondly, we spent a lot of time in Montana. I have a big extended family there, and none of those folks are well-to-do. They're not rich in assets, they're very rich in life. Very, very rich in life. And one thing we did do about 15 years ago, I guess, is we bought a ranch south of my hometown, because I especially wanted my boys out there in the summer working with men that work super hard from dawn to dusk and don't get paid hardly anything, and if something breaks, you fix it. We did require that the kids always be in a team activity, and they could never quit. They could, during the season, they could never quit anything during the season. They could quit at the end of the year, but then they had to sign up for something else, and they always had to have jobs. And we highly encouraged their first job be something at retail, that they work at retail waiting on people and learning how the world actually works and how people actually interact with folks, particularly those folks that have no power, How will your kids react to, how do people treat waitresses and people that serve you? You pick up a lot on somebody on how they treat someone serving them. But we didn't ever talk about money. They didn't really have any idea. I mean, they knew we lived in this fancy house. We took, had owned properties and took vacations. And people knew my dad because he did this job, but we never really talked to him about money. And then as we approached this age 60 thing, my wife and I had some real hard arguments about, well, what do we give the kids? And she said, well, that's easy, 0. And I'm like, well, we've given way more than that to your cat thing at the Humane Society. Seems kind of like a weird deal to not give our kids anything but give all that money to cats. And I was like, oh, we should give them each $5 million. And she was like, are you out of your mind? They would never have to work. That's like the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And so we went round and round, and Greg Porter and some friends really helped. They've been very helpful. We ended up a couple of years ago giving them each $1 million with real tight guardrails on what they can do. And Greg and his team are real involved. I don't have any involvement with the kids on that, neither does Kathy. Greg and advisors do that. I think they've been responsible stewards, learning and growing. So maybe would make sense for the right things more, but I'm not sure. But then we really wanted to know, would they get involved in philanthropy with us? And we had been donors to a thing for a number of years, and there was a particular woman in the development that was really, really good, and Kathy really liked her. And she left that organization to start her own advisory with an older gentleman who ran the foundation for a prominent family in Colorado whose beer you might have drank. And so they have an advisory service, and we have had them on retainer for a while, and they're doing the work of training the kids, basically, of how all this works, but also they've done an alignment exercise of what are the kids' values versus what do you think your mom and dad's values are. What is important in your mom and dad's life that you think is important in your life? And 3 of the 4 kids are married. The 4th looks like he's moving down the path of having found his I wouldn't say wife, but it seems like that's where it's going. But that whole thing of entering other people into your family, it's complicated, and money makes it complicated. And so how do you have that conversation with your future son-in-law that, hey, yeah, my daughter's going to get some inheritance, and we want to pay for family trips and blah, blah, blah. And hey, Kevin, how do you feel about that? Having those conversations with the outlaws, as I call them, it's super critical to us. One of the most important priorities in our life right now is making our family work with the new entrants. And it's complicated. And money's a weird thing to talk about. And these consultants, these advisors, these friends have been very helpful getting us all on the same page. And then they're doing the work to get our kids up to speed. The kids can call them anytime, ask about anything they want. They get together regularly. The kids have a family gathering. And we're kind of, Terry, in the crawl, walk, run. We're just now starting to put money into a formal foundation because it's kind of doesn't make any tax sense to do it really versus giving directly. But we need to start filling that bucket so that particularly our daughter, who will be real involved in the administrative running side, starts learning. And so what's been really impressive is they're interested, and secondly, we're both really comfortable that if something happened to us, who knows, life is very unpredictable, if something happened to us and all of a sudden they have this thing they got to do, they would pull it off. They would need advisors and trusted people, but things are in place that they could pull it off.
Right.
It would be very stressful, but they could do it.
Right, and you said a couple things. I mean, you talked about the structure for communication around that,
Yeah.
and learning and a process. And those are the two aspects that trip most families up. So that's great. In the just a couple minutes that we have left, I want to open it up. I know we covered a lot of important topics that are on a lot of people's minds and whatnot. But do we have any questions out there that we got right here? He's right there, just so we can. There we go.
Hi, John.
Good to see you.
Good
How
to
are
see
you?
We're good, thank you.
Good.
Good to be here. I'd like you guys to talk about grandkids. We've talked about kids here, and now we're at that stage where we got some grandkids coming along with a lot of potential, but they're that generation away, thinking a little bit different about life and wealth. I'd like to know how you guys are approaching that.
Good start.
Gosh, such a great question. And we don't know yet, quite honestly. We want our kids to struggle some. And we want them to have the hassle and pain of expensive daycare, finding daycare, thinking about schools. We are, with our kids living in cities, I'm not at all happy with the direction of what's happening in some public school systems. Not happy at all. And it's wrong, and it has to be fought to the death to stop some of what's going on in public schools. And so I'm much more of a private school advocate for my grandkids if my kids are going to live in these giant cities with these giant anonymous school districts that are so badly politicized right now. And it seems like the country's responding in a very good way, but it's a mess in a lot of these city school districts. If my kids lived in Seattle, I would kidnap those grandkids and take them to Montana to the SY one-room schoolhouse.
You can kidnap mine, actually, if you want to take them to Montana.
So educate, but what we want our kids to struggle for a while, and but I bet we end up with education, 529, some sort of a 529 program. Greg's here, so you can codify that in case we never get it written down. And you say, well, in that thing in May 17th, yeah. I think education, I would be personally okay, like if a grandchild wanted to start a business, but I wouldn't want to support my grandchildren doing anything where they didn't have to work really hard and they didn't have to struggle really hard to build something. So just giving them money, no chance of that.
John, what would you think, one idea that we've had that we haven't implemented is to match or quadruple even the amount that they made. So if you have a grandchild that's making $50,000 a year, you give them another 50, 100, 150.
Yeah.
So they have to make something,
Yeah.
but will make their life a bit more comfortable on that.
That's really good. That's a really good point. And it's like my wife wants to pay the kids for doing work on behalf of the family.
Right.
And I think that's a really good idea. You can do it in the form of a gift or however you do it. But one son in particular has just done a lot of work on one project in particular. And he doesn't want any money, but she feels like we should pay them to do that work. Mm-hmm. And I think I would want to construct it around something that was, here was the goal, you achieved it, therefore there's a reward. Mm-hmm. But I would want somebody to be the steward of how they can spend it till they're a certain age. Mm-hmm. And so far it looks like our kids are on a good path right now, and they've made good decisions and good choices. But life's funny. You never know what happens.
I think the key, and thank you both, and it's a great question. I think the key is just to talk about it in communication, because our kids want to know what our values are, and they'll carry that through, and our grandkids want to know the values too. I'm going to say our grandkids. I mean, theoretically. But I know it's on a lot of folks' minds, so thanks for asking that question. I hope you both can stay around for a break or two and whatnot, because I would imagine there's lots of other questions for you. But a round of applause for Pam and John. That was really, really helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, what a great segue to our next session. Amazing. So another round of applause for both John and Pam. I feel like they just did a real good commercial for the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon on having the right team so that you can make the right decisions for your family. So we're really excited to kick off our session, which is really around strategy, to optimize your financial plan. So no matter what stage you are in your plan, as John and Pam alluded, having the right team to help make those decisions are really imperative to the success of your plan. So the goal of our session today is to actually give some practical advice with the team members on the stage on the things you need to do no matter what stage you are in your financial plan. Both Terry and I are going to provide insights for overall investment and risk management. We also have Sarah Bauman, a partner at Cano Gates. Sarah's going to provide some estate planning tips and give you some legal perspective on what you need to do. And then last but not least, Matt Goodwin, who's the Director of Family Wealth Services at CBIZ Berntson Porter, who's going to give some tax planning advice, all right? Again, it's going to be an organic discussion between the four of us, and we're hoping that you get some good nuggets to help you with your planning overall. So let's get into the heart of our discussion. I'll start with you, Terry. Whether you're at the beginning stages or currently have a plan in place, there are multiple moving parts as well as many players that you need to execute your plan. Can you talk about the importance of having a defined process and the appropriate members to ensure that your goals are met?
Yeah, thanks, Lori. And it is a great segue, because I'm sure we'll funnel back around to some of what we were talking about in the last session. But when we talk to the families that we serve, there's 5 main concerns that come up. It's wealth preservation, it's liquidity, making sure that we have the money when we need it to support our lifestyle and goals, tax mitigation, taking care of our heirs, and supporting the causes that we care about. It's those 5 that, there's others, but those 5 overwhelmingly come up. So you need a process to make sure that you address all of those, and you can identify what the concerns are in your unique situation, and then put the team around you to help solve those. So it's really about making sure nothing falls through the cracks. So once you've got that team, and a number of the components, are up here today, then it becomes having a project manager, so to speak, to help implement the solutions. It's not enough to just get a plan and have the answers and here's everything you need to do. It's like, who's going to drive that process to make sure it happens, and then can revisit it and adapt. So I think it is important to have a process, have it personalized for your situation. There's no kind of one size fits all for this, and then have somebody that, or a group of people that can help kind of shepherd it.
Perfect. So Sarah, let's tag you onto this, and you've helped many families, and we have this conversation about family office planning versus estate planning. Let's chat about what you mean by that.
So I think that, thank you everybody for having me here. I think that a lot of it is semantics, and people think about estate planning and what does that mean? And I get the question of what is that? What is a family office? And it's really planning for the estate planning part, the way I think of it, can encompass a family office planning. It's, do you have all of your your plan in place so that if you become disabled, if you die, you know what's going to happen for sure. And you've had professionals vet what you think is going to happen so that it actually will happen. I would say 7 times out of 10, when people tell me what's going to happen when they die, and then I look at the documents, they don't match. And so you really need to have a plan in place that works. And a family office is really just planning and structure. It can be a whole bunch of different things as part of your estate plan to put together. When you do exit your business and you have some money, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to start a foundation? Do you want to start a new business? Do you want to work with family members to invest in new businesses and set things up and use it as a vehicle to help your adult children or grandchildren? And a true family office has some very particular tax and legal structures that go into it. So making sure you meet those, if you're really going down the tax angle of a family office, it's important to have the proper structure and thought process ahead of time. But it's often just making sure that as a family, you have your plan in place for what's going to happen.
So I'm going to tag on either Terry or Sarah. When do you think it's appropriate to have a formal family office? When would that be appropriate?
When you say formal family office, you mean kind of all in-house and whatnot. Personally, I mean, I work with a number of the families that we work with have a family office and we interact with them. I think it's almost always suboptimal, but people like to have these. And the reason I say that is because what's the most critical is that in all these seats around the table from a planning standpoint, you want to have specialists, you want to have best in breed. What's most important about the family office structure is the communication and the singular focus around a set of goals. Not that everybody's in-house. It's much easier for us to put the best of breed advisors together by saying, well, we've got the best tax person here at Berntson Porter CBIZ and the best estate planning attorney here. I probably can't hire them myself full time, but as long as I can have access to them and have a good method for communication, now I'm getting best of breed around the family, and so that's how I would view it.
Would you add anything, Sarah?
Some of it's finances. You know, if you're really bent on having a family office, you've got to have a fair bit of money to make it work. So the way that I approach it with conversations is if somebody comes and says, hey, I want to do a family office, can you do that? Which I get that question a lot. I try to back that up and say, what is it you actually want to do? What are your goals here? What are you really trying to do? And what does that mean to you? And that animal that somebody wants to put together may not be a family office at all. So we can help structure the right solution for what the goals are.
All right, I'm going to shift to stay on you, Sarah. There's a lot of families here, business owners, lots of stages of our estate planning overall. If you were to give a 101 on the general estate planning documents you have to have in place, could you maybe articulate that to the audience? And if you have those, you know, maybe talk a little bit about how you should be often looking at them to making sure you update them.
I could play a fun game and make you guys stand up if you think you have your plan in place, but I won't because I'm not going to out you guys. But so the foundation of estate planning, I think of like a foundation of building a house, and every house has a foundation, no matter how big or small, or whether you live in an apartment building, there is a foundation. And that's the same thing with your estate plan. Everybody should have a will and or a living trust, and a power of attorney for finances, a power of attorney for healthcare, maybe a living will, maybe a cremation or burial directive, or nowadays a composting directive in Washington. Everybody should have that, regardless of your situation, your wealth, your age. And once you have that foundation in place, it's always changeable, it's amendable, but then it's how much more building do you want to do? Some people stop, and that's all they need, and that's all they want. Other people are going to build foundations, and they're going to build businesses, and they're going to build trusts, and they're going to build tax planning vehicles. And so it's really looking at consistently what do you have and what's appropriate for your life right now, and making sure those things are updated.
Perfect. Would you add anything on when you should start, if you haven't even started? And we talked about starting early and the importance of it. Maybe you can tag on to that.
Now is the time, right? If you haven't. A lot of folks we work with, in all seriousness, is when they have children who turn 18. That is a point to start. It's when parents have kids and you're used to having legal authority to take your kids to the doctor and help them and do things for them. and then they go off to college and they get in a ski accident on vacation, and you get a call from this hospital 6 states away, you can't talk to them, you can't do anything. And so that is a stage where we help clients with their kids or their grandkids make sure that powers of attorney are in place so you can help your adult children. It's a good entryway into planning. It's a good entryway at a very young age to, I client have advisors, I have people that help me. But that from that ground stage up, it is always good to start. A lot of people start when they have kids, when they have a business, but it's never too late. People come to me and they get sheepish. There's been a lot of people in COVID last couple of years. The death count on the newspaper for the last 2.5 years has made everybody realize we're mortal. And I've had a lot of calls of people trying to get it done. And whatever the catalyst is, it always feels better to get things updated so you feel good for right now.
Perfect. Matt, I'm going to shift to you on taxes, everyone's favorite topic. Obviously, managing our assets is one thing, but mitigating tax is another. Can you share about 2 or 3 strategies for tax savings that would be helpful to our audience? I think we have a slide on Professor Goodwin's tax strategies, if we can put that on the slide for you to articulate.
Yeah, happy to. I guess I'll start by saying as a CPA and tax advisor, what we do is custom to each family. So it's hard to kind of give blanket advice like everyone in the audience go out and do a Roth conversion today, but we are seeing kind of 3 trends to save on taxes right now. The first is charity, so planning around gifts to donor advised funds, private foundations, charitable trusts are really popular right now. And it's kind of one of the last double benefits in the tax code where you can deduct the fair market value of a gift and not pay capital gains tax on it. So right now, private foundations pay a flat rate of 1.4%, so we do a lot of planning around private foundations as well. In a high tax rate environment, looking for exclusion items like qualified small business stock is still around where you could potentially exclude up to $10 million of capital gains on a qualified small business. Or qualified opportunity zone funds is a good way to defer taxes as well. So we're getting creative. We're working with advisors like Terry at Parsion and estate planning attorneys to create these really custom plans. I guess one last area is just planning around estate planning. So, right now the estate exemption is at $12 million, and here in Washington it's lower at $2.2 million. And so it's kind of the golden age right now to get an estate plan in place and try to lock in that exemption.
Would you add anything about any other legislation that's we could potentially see? And Sarah, you could maybe add to that in 2022. Maybe talk about the capital gains tax as well.
Yeah, so it's a hard time to be a CPA because there's so much uncertainty right now. There was a proposed Washington capital gains tax of 7%, which is effective the first of this year. But it's been challenged, so it's going to have to go to the Washington Supreme Court. We also heard from President Biden in Build Back Better and his recent Green Book proposal about, just different targeted taxes towards wealthy families. So that's what we're trying to get out in front of with tax planning right now.
Sarah, would you add anything? I know that there was some risk to grantor trust in the last year. Do you anticipate any other changes from a legislative standpoint for estate tax?
Always. I think it keeps life interesting, and I think the message is to really be proactive and try to do good planning that makes sense for you at any given time and to stay ahead of it. It's been a whirlwind of managing, for the last several years with the election and tax proposals, and there were a whole slew of tax proposals last year in 2021 that were eking up until the end of the year, and people were madly trying to get trusts in place and accounts opened and things funded and doing tax planning strategies, and then it all went away. And then we have the capital gain tax in Washington, which we all knew would be challenged. It's going to take a couple of years till it all gets filtered out. So it is what it is, but I think what the benefit of that is that I do not like to support people doing planning when it's reactive to, oh my gosh, there's a tax law that's going to be put in place in 30 days, so I better do something now. It's much better to be thoughtful and think about whether it really makes sense for you, and is this something that's good for you and you want to do, and have time to talk with your advisors. So talking now before those changes are a real threat or going to happen tomorrow is the best case scenario.
Perfect. Terry, I'm going to shift to you, and it's been a wild environment with the market. We've been talking about taxes. We've been talking about estate planning. Are there any other sort of unique investment opportunities? I know Dr. Claus is going to provide some insight in the next session that you're utilizing with your clients to kind of mitigate some of this tax and some future planning risk.
Yes, and Matt touched on one of them, but I'll also add to what they were just talking about as far as anything on the landscape out there in the next year or so. It's always hard to predict, right? And you got midterm elections coming up, so that comes into play on what can get put in place. But there is the Trump tax reform that we know sunsets in a few years. So that's a change that's happening one way or another. So that's something, whether it's with regards to the estate tax and lifetime exemption, or opportunity zones, which is a window that's closing to take advantage of as well. And opportunity zones is one that I would emphasize, and we've probably done more than most firms around here as far as exposure on that, just because I think it's not only one of the best tax gifts that we've seen out there, but it's particularly suited for an inflationary environment when you're talking about exposure to multifamily homes in some of these areas that have been underinvested in. So that's one example. The other example, really, and it's not a new concept, but I think it's a concept a lot of investment managers forget until the end of the year, is just loss harvesting in volatility. You know, when 10% gains go to 20% losses, all of a sudden, sorry, but that's happened in most growth portfolios. You know, you can sell those losses, move it over into something similar, and write it back up, but pocket those losses, because come at the end of the year or in future years, you can use that to offset gains. So a lot of folks in the investment community wait till November or December and say, do we have realized gains and do we have unrealized losses? Let's offset. You should be looking at it based on volatility, because you could always use those losses to offset gains. So that's the big one that I would recommend people kind of look at. Other tools are in your world. I know there's a number of tax mitigation tools.
And just to kind of tag on to that, on the insurance side of the house, you know, there are multiple ways to utilize insurance. It's tax-free deferred growth, tax-free distribution at death. Terry and I have been working on various clients on where you can minimize, instead of buying a ton of insurance, actually using insurance as an asset class, having that money grow tax deferred, not paying any gains, so no capital gains on any of that, and having it get paid out at death tax-free. So multiple ways to utilize insurance as part of your tax mitigation strategy. I'm going to shift to gifting, and either Matt or Sarah can address this. Terry brought up the Trump tax law and the issue of the state tax sunsetting. Are you recommending people start actively gifting in advance? Could you maybe provide commentary, either one of you?
Yeah, we are seeing clients that are taking advantage of this higher lifetime exemption. So there's trusts like a spousal lifetime access trust or a SLAT where you can lock in your exemption. There's generation skipping transferred trust as well. So we are seeing clients actively wanting to use that exemption now before it sunsets.
I'd say yes. If you're in a camp where you can give away as a couple $24 million and not blink your eyes, then yes. And it's just a matter of how you do that and how to take advantage of it. Oftentimes it's business interests going into trust for kids or grandkids, or thinking of different types of structures of what's appropriate for you. Again, but for folks who are giving away $24 million would not work for them or makes them uncomfortable or makes them nervous, then it's a much bigger conversation of, is there a structure or something we can do? But, as we talked about the tax law changes, who knows what's going to happen? The law could change. It could be repealed sooner. It could be made permanent. We're going to have a whole nother presidential election, you guys, before that rolls around. And who knows what will happen? But it's absolutely something that if it makes sense for people, it's here now, use it or lose it, potentially.
And I know timing's everything, and I know, Terry, you work with a lot of business owners. Those are in transition, maybe selling their business. So from an M&A perspective, if you are considering to sell your business, are there some planning techniques and advice you would give to any business owner that might be thinking about that?
Yeah, there's a bunch, but on a high level, first, make sure you should sell your business. Make sure that the after-tax proceeds will support your lifestyle, because otherwise we can keep working, right? So you don't want to get on the other side of a transaction and realize that the proceeds won't sustain what your business was sustaining from a lifestyle standpoint. The other thing to think about is, it'll probably be, it is generally the event in a business owner's career and life where they're paying more taxes than ever before. But it's also the opportunity to save more in taxes than probably ever before and again in a business owner's life. So there's some tools, both on the income tax mitigation and the wealth transfer tax mitigation, that go away after the sale. In other words, if you don't plan for them and utilize them, and meet with the professional both on the estate and the tax side leading up to the event, those opportunities will be lost. So it's just plan, meet before, and just realize it's the biggest opportunity to save in taxes in a business owner's life.
Matt, do you want to add to that? I know we talked about business owner strategies. Maybe you can add to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Getting started early is always important. So I'd say 12 to 18 months out, for a sale. And we work a lot too with companies that are going through an IPO process as well. Kind of worst case scenario is a client that calls you or runs into your office saying, hey, we're public now, or we sold, and you're wondering, why couldn't we get some planning in place before that event? We see it a lot with unexercised stock options, and for business owners looking at a sale, making gifts prior to a transaction.
Sarah, anything to add on that? Anything you need to be doing post or pre-transaction?
I say pre-transaction, there is a lot of opportunity, but even before you get to the sale mark, often these companies, you don't just go from zero to sale, right? There's the growth trajectory. And oftentimes when you have a company that's growing, there's a lot of opportunity to transfer value before it gets to your top. And you can have that growth grow in a trust for your kids or in some sort of entity to benefit your family, if that makes sense for you guys. And that can be a good opportunity to think about throughout the life of your business. And also, if you have charitable intentions, there's some really cool opportunities to get portions of a business into a charitable entity or a donor advised fund before you sell, and you can save a whole boatload of money on capital gain tax if you have time and are thoughtful about it, rather than sell business, then take money and donate it to charity. So it's just cool things to talk about.
All right, now let's, we've talked about taxes, we talk about estate, talk about unique investment opportunities. Let's maybe ask a big question of what we're not talking about and things we often overlook. Terry, I'll start with you. What's one thing that you think in the whole financial planning process that people are not really thinking about?
We see, like I mentioned just a bit ago, about lack of clarity around what the proceeds can support. So we build these cash flow models prior to a liquidity event that give visibility on that, and then can help with the tax mitigation strategies and wealth transfer mitigation. So it's really having clarity on what you and your family need to kind of, I call it, build a brick wall around your goals, because that will inform what else is left with respect to your assets. That will help you maybe move to trust more confidently and knowing you're not cannibalizing your own goals. Move to trust for the next generation, or move to charity prior to a liquidity event to optimize that. But it starts with the confidence of what you'll need to support your lifestyle. Otherwise, the tendency is to hold back and not optimize the planning work.
Sarah, what's one thing that people are not doing?
Look at your estate plans, guys. It's something to think about. None of us want to die or to give up control of businesses or to think about not being there for our families. But if you're not, make sure you have your plan in place and talk about it. I think Terry in the last presentation and John mentioned too, talking about it with your family, with your spouse, if you have a spouse, talking about it with your kids in a way that makes sense, so that it is a conversation and it is academically, from seeing the other side, the families that talk about it, those kids, those next generations, those third generations do so much better with the money. They're less likely to toast it, from at least what I've seen. I'm sure Terry could provide more insight on that.
And Matt, taxes, anything that people are overlooking to help mitigate or to add some savings?
Yeah, I would say retirement planning. There's just so many options these days to put money away for retirement. Never too late to get started, never too early as well. So there's SEP IRAs, there's solo 401ks. We do a lot of work around cash balance and defined benefit plans as well. But just a good way to set funds aside for what's next in your life, and then we can do some really awesome tax planning as well in your retirement years.
I'm going to shift to some questions that were brought online for those that registered. Do you think that COVID has affected how we should think long-term in terms of our planning? And general question, Terry, I'll have you take a stab at that.
Well, I think the answer is absolutely yes, and I think for everybody it's different. Sarah alluded to it earlier, that everybody's kind of mortality has been in front of us in the news and in the newspaper all the time. So tomorrow's not promised kind of thing, and so from a planning standpoint, from a next generation communication standpoint, I think it has, and obviously my world is the psychological effects of that affect the investment and the market side, which is a whole nother topic, which maybe we'll talk about here in one of the next sessions.
Sarah, from a planning, has it delayed anything? Are you seeing differences with your clients?
I think it's made people focus on their planning a little bit more. When early 2020, everybody sort of waited. Because honestly, I'm like the last person somebody wants to call. Going to see your estate planning lawyer is never fun. You're talking about death and dying and money and taxes, and just is not what most people want to do. So they postpone it. But then after everybody realized, hey, COVID's a thing, and we're going to have to deal with this head on, I was able to help people, I think, feel better to get through it and struggle together and get to a place. And I'm going to bet money that everybody in this room has had COVID or knows somebody with COVID, and probably some of you have lost people for COVID, and it's been a really super, super challenging several years, and we're not done yet. It's not over, and so we don't know how the game ends, and so it's important to just be proactive about what your plan is.
This next question that was online, is it better to have an internal trustee that you might know personally or use an external source? Either Terry or Sarah.
Oof. That's a very personalized question depending on the situation. Some trusts are really easy to work with, like as you know, like an insurance trust. For many years, there might be nothing to do, even paying premiums sometimes. And then others have a lot more care and feeding necessity, and you want to make sure that trustee is around when it's needed, and that might be more, a corporate trustee or something that, if relationships change or situations change, you're not going to have to go searching for another trustee.
Would you recommend your CPA or your attorney be your trustee?
I never take the role as a trustee. In all seriousness, I think it used to be super, super common, and some of you may have your lawyers as trustee. That used to be just kind of the way it was. Lawyers would more or less retire and then take over as trustee for their clients' trusts. But I think that with the changes in laws and tax laws and just the complications of trusts and the way families are set up, that most clients are much better served having an independent trustee, because being a trustee is a totally different job than being a lawyer or being an accountant or being a wealth advisor. And I think you guys are probably pretty regulated that you often can't unless you know somebody personally. But I think you're better served having people who that's what their job is.
Perfect. So we're right at the cusp for questions in a little bit here. We're going to kind of close up and round out our discussion and talk about one piece of advice you would give to the audience to help optimize their plan. Why don't we start with you, Matt?
Yeah, I'd say, just get started early, be open to new ideas. When I first started my career in public accounting 15 years ago, we didn't have, SLATs or qualified opportunity zones and all these kind of new vehicles. So just be open to new ways of doing things.
Terry?
It's been echoed multiple times, but I just have a framework, for communication with your kids. Part of the advantage of having an estate plan, a structure in place, and it doesn't have to be, I always say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It just has to be there. Much of it you can always change, but it gives you the structure of which to have conversations with the next generation, and whether it's around wealth, whether it's around your values and intent, whether you have, we run family meetings all the time. It's just have any communication, even if you think you're not good at it, is better than no communication.
Sarah?
Well, Terry stole my answer, so I would come up with another answer, but I echo that 1,000%. And rely on your advisors. Make sure you have a good advisory team. I am a huge fan of the team approach and making sure your advisors are working as a team, and take advantage of that. And let your advisors help you have a family meeting and talk about all those issues. I walk with families through those issues all the time, and let's talk about, if you want to talk about taxes, we can talk about taxes. If you want to talk about what does mom want if she's taken off life support, what does that look like? Those are hard issues that families have a hard time talking about. My family has a hard time talking about it. And you have to find a way to let your advisors help you get through it.
Perfect. I think we're just right on time for questions, so we'll open up for questions. Again, round of applause for our advisors on stage. Do we have any questions that anybody would like to ask?
We answered them all. It's crazy. How did that happen?
Well, we're definitely going to be available throughout the event. This will give us some time. That we have some videos we're going to share, and you can feel free to reach out to any one of our advisors on stage throughout our break. And I think our next session is with Claus, and that is at 2:45. So we'll see you then. Thank you.
So it's my pleasure now to introduce Claus to Wildt. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Nailed it.
Thank you.
Claus is the Senior Vice President for Capital Market Strategy at Fidelity Institutional. He's responsible for formulating and communicating Fidelity's capital market view to Fidelity Institutional's clients, which includes Parsion Private Wealth. He's the author of Fidelity Investments Investment Themes Market Outlook series. Prior to joining Fidelity in January of 2006, he co-founded TMAC Investments, an advisory firm which operated like a hedge fund and employed global macro strategy, investing in broad long-term investment themes. I was first introduced to Klaus's work from his involvement on the research advisory board to UBS, position he still holds. He has a unique perspective on the economic and market environment. We particularly appreciate his ability to kind of cut through the noise that we all hear out there and try to navigate through. It's really, really important. Most importantly, Claus is the husband to Robin and the father to Sydney, who works for Instagram in New York, and to Spencer, who is an engineer for Boeing right here in Seattle. And after Claus shares his insights, he and I will come back up here, and hopefully you've got some questions to ask. There's a little bit going on in the economic and market environment out there, so this is your chance. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Claus.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to talk for about 25, 30 minutes. I'm going to skip a couple of slides, but I will show you some others. And then Terry and I will be up here to take some questions. There's certainly a lot going on. I'm doing this for 25 or 30 years now, and I think this is the most complex and difficult investment environment I've ever been in. If you go back, for example, to the start of the pandemic, from an investment perspective, you only had to figure out when did the society, all the countries of the world, mobilize enough resources and money that markets could get comfortable, that eventually a medical solution could be found. And when markets thought, okay, we have enough shots on goal now, a vaccine or a drug is going to come, the markets turn up. Human crisis, everything, but from an investment perspective, very, very straightforward. Great financial crisis in 2008. Biggest recession in 100 years. But from an investment perspective, you only had to figure out when did the Fed and the Treasury put enough money together to stabilize the banking system. As soon as this was the case, the market said, okay, this is a normal recession, we're fine. And the markets turn up. And here, we have a war in Europe that, let's face it, could turn into World War III. There's a global food crisis coming. There's an energy crisis. China has still zero COVID policy, which is causing major supply chain issues, inflation everywhere. And then the Fed is raising rates on top of all of this. So you have all these cross currents. And it's really difficult to get your arms around it because so many things can go right and so many things can go wrong. So for myself, to figure out what's going on here, so I came up with this framework here, which is really simple. But it's a good reminder. This is the value proposition of the equity market. If you invest in equities in the US, you should expect an average annual return of about 8%, markets to be up 3 out of 4 years, and in exchange, you have to endure 3 corrections of 5% per year, 1 correction of 10% per year. Every 3 years, one that's about 15, and every 6 years, one that's 1%. That's the value proposition. And there's one lesson and one concept to it. The lesson is, if you don't want to invest in equities and you want to be out of the market, the odds are against you. The market is up 3 out of 4 years. The odds are against you being right, being out of the market. And here's the concept. In any crisis, in any environment, I only ask myself one question: is this a big one or a small one? Right? If it's a small correction, even the ones that are painful, the 15% ones that happen every 3 years, are painful, but they are all buying opportunities. But you do want to avoid the ones that are greater than 20, because they can get a lot greater than 20. And when you look at all the ones that are bigger than 20, what you'll find out is that all of them also had a recession in the US. So the question that you really have to ask yourself is, whatever is going to go on cause a recession in the US or not? Is it going to cause a recession in Europe or not? Or is it causing a recession in the emerging market world? At the moment, and by the way, this is the empirical evidence to that, markets are normally up through the whole business cycle. Only in recessions they are down. Now, this is where the economy is now. China is in a recession because of their zero COVID policy. Every other economy is sort of mid-cycle. Normally, you would have another 2 or 3 years before you get into recession. But that's 6 weeks ago and now. What really matters is, where is it going, right? Where is it going? So let's talk about US, Europe, and emerging markets really briefly. I'm pretty sure the US is not going to go into recession. Okay? I'm almost 100% sure over the next 12 months. The biggest force in the US is the consumer. Consumer is responsible for 70% of all GDP. If the US consumer is doing well, the US economy is doing well. And the US consumer is doing very well. They have saved a ton of money during COVID, a ton of money. And a couple of factors came into it. First of all, the US consumer couldn't spend a whole lot because they were locked in their homes. Secondly, equity prices went up, home prices went up. And for those who didn't make a lot of money, they got very, very generous unemployment payments. If you look at the consumer balance sheet, it's really, really strong. And frankly, that's why we have inflation. That's why we have inflation. Because the US consumer has so much money to spend, the amount of goods that can sort of carry that is not there. So the US consumer balance sheets are looking great. And on top of that, you have 11.5 million open jobs. 11.5 million open jobs. If you travel around, you know this. The number one issue of business owners is we can't find enough people to work. Right? I'm staying at the W here. They don't serve breakfast. Can't find anybody to work. Everywhere. And so you have a very, very strong consumer. You have 11.5 million jobs. You have the biggest problem that businesses can't find enough workers. And then you have a slight pop in oil prices. The average consumer spends about 2.5% of all their spending on energy. That is not enough to meaningful impact spending. And then the market is afraid of the Fed raising rates. A good guide, and I'm sorry, this is getting a little complicated, but a good guide of when the Fed stops raising rates is the level the 10-year was at the time the Fed started to raise rates. So let me say it again. Sort of the moment the Fed starts to raise rates, you should look at what's the yield of the 10-year treasuries at that time. And that's normally how often the Fed is going to raise short-term rates, just as a guidepost. The Fed started this, the 10-year was at 2.7. So let's say the Fed is raising rates to 3%. Forgive me if I ask you, but you seem to be around for quite some time. Do you think 3% is a high interest rate in your experience? Have you ever thought to yourself, oh my God, this economy cannot work if interest rates go to 3%? I mean, give me a break. It's just ridiculous to be afraid of this. So you have a slight pop in oil prices, and the Fed might raise from 0 to 3%. Last quarter in 2021, we had the strongest GDP growth since 1984. So this notion that this economy is in trouble and on the verge of going to recession sounds completely sort of silly to me. So I think the US is fine. And if the economy grows, normally corporate profits grow, and equity prices normally follow earnings, and I think this is a buying opportunity for US equities. I really do. I think Europe is going to go into recession. The economy was never that strong to begin with. They're paying a lot more for energy prices. The natural gas prices have gone up a lot more in Europe than here, a lot more. And they are very much reliant on supply chains from the Ukraine and from other Eastern European countries. And their German car manufacturers are struggling to get parts, and you see this everywhere happening. And I think Europe is going to go into recession. So I would be a little bit light on the developed international front. Emerging market is very, very complicated. Russia is already out of the index. Eastern Europe is probably going to go into recession with the rest of Europe. Latin America is booming. Latin America, the equities are actually one of the strongest equity classes for the year. They are really benefiting from higher commodity prices and being quite far away. Asia, ex-China, is hanging in there and is doing okay. China is in a recession. And so if you put this all together, you probably would not invest in emerging markets. However, I think China is going to lose its fight against Omicron. Their zero COVID policy has served them very, very well for the last 2 years, and now it's a trap that they don't know how to come out of. They don't know what to do. They're really trapped here. Their vaccines do not work. So their options are to admit to their citizens that their vaccines don't work and that they have to go to the West and buy vaccines, which they don't want to do, to save face. to let the virus go and kill a lot of people, because the Chinese, not all of them are very healthy. Some of them are old, they're small. Healthcare system is not that strong. Or shut the economy down completely, over and over again. And the trap is that they cannot get to herd immunity. They cannot get to herd immunity unless they either get a vaccine or let the virus go through the system. So they are stuck. This is just a rumor, okay? This is just a rumor, but I've heard it now twice from major Wall Street firms. And so it's not the Fidelity opinion, it's just a rumor, but it makes a certain amount of sense. The rumor is that the Chinese have gone to the World Health Organization and said the next variant of sort of the COVID, let's call it the flu. Okay? They don't need zero COVID to fight the flu, right? So it's a rumor, but it does make a certain amount of sense. But this is the situation where they are, right? They're really stuck here. But at some point, they are going to realize that there's no alternatives than let the virus go through. And the experience from South Africa and from the UK and from all the Western countries is that when the virus, Omicron, goes through a country, it takes like 8 weeks. It's like the wildfire. It goes through your country like a wildfire, but it runs out of targets very, very quickly because it's so contagious. And the reason why I'm all saying this is that after this wave, you want to buy emerging. After this wave, and when China is done with that wave, you want to buy emerging. Because when China comes out of recession, they are going to stimulate the economy very, very strongly, and that lifts all the boats in emerging. We are not there yet, but watch the cases in China. When they get closer to a level of herd immunity, I think that is a great buy. Going back to the US here for a moment. So we all know why it happened, right? We all know sort of all the different things that are going on that the market is worried about. What you might not know, and I'm skipping a couple of charts here, is that what happened this year is very, very typical for a midterm election year. This is the 4 years of the presidential cycle. We are in year 2 right now. Biden is in year 2. You normally get a very big drawdown, 19%, the biggest of all the 4 years. By the way, we almost went to 19. And after that, you get a very, very strong rebound rally. And by the way, the market has always been up the 12 months after the midterm election. The market has always been up the 12 months after the midterm elections. So why is that the case? Well, think about it. Normally, the party in power loses the midterm election by a big margin. And then they realize they have to get the economy in shape to win a re-election. And they do everything they can to dress up the economy. And that normally drives the market higher. The other thing that you might not know is these are returns following a spike in global uncertainty, equity returns. The dark blue is when everything is peaceful and there's not a cloud on the sky. And the red dotted line is when there's major, major trouble. And you can see the returns coming out of this are very, very strong. I'm not quite sure if we're at the bottom yet, but it feels very, very close. All right, it feels very, very close. And when you talk to most people on Wall Street, what's missing? Most people say it's really just a really bad day. We just need one bad 2 or 3 hours that everybody gives up. Okay? That you all call Terry and say, get me out of it. I don't want to ever buy equities again. And it just needs 2 or 3 hours for the market to be really sort of for everyone to throw in the towel. And that's normally the bottom. And we haven't had that yet. But if you see that day, call Terry to buy something, not to sell, okay? So that's sort of my outlook here. I think we're okay. Now, I could stop here. But one thing I've learned is that during these crises, I've learned this in 2008, and I learned this during sort of the internet bubble, I always got these questions about, yeah, I see these statistics, I see the history, I know you should hang in there, but where's the growth coming from? Where's the growth coming from? What is going to drive the market higher? Just paint me a picture of sort of where is it coming from. And I can tell you right now, my track record of predicting this is very, very poor. Okay? In 1994, which I believe is actually sort of a very, very similar year to what we had here today, where the Fed was raising rates aggressively, the 10-year went up relentless, and the market was in a trading range for a prolonged period of time. And then the interest rates stopped going up, and the market took off and ran for 4 years. In 1994, it was the internet that was the next thing. In 2008, it was fracking. The US becoming energy independent. So I would have not expected the internet nor fracking to be the right. So keep that in mind when I talk to you about what I think is going to drive this market higher going forward. Okay, it's my best stab at it. Okay. The first thing to keep in mind is that the US equity market has moved in cycles, basically since 1896. You had cycles of 8 years, 18 years up, 14 years flat, 18 years up, 14 years flat, 18 years up, and then roughly 18 years up. And the meta story behind it is that the market always goes from peak greed to peak fear to peak greed to peak fear to peak greed. The last time we really had peak greed was at the top of the internet bubble. The last time we had peak fear was at the bottom of the financial crisis. And we are nowhere close to peak greed. Nowhere close to peak greed. I think most people and most investors are still scarred from the pullbacks. There's COVID, great financial crisis, internet bubble. People are underinvested in equities. These are flows. This is the flow since the bottom of the financial crisis. In red, the amount of money that went into fixed income, and in blue, the amount of money that went into stocks. Equities have done really, really well since there, since the bottom in 2009, have done fabulously well. But you can see most money went into fixed income. And so we are nowhere near peak greed. And if you look at that money is invested right now in vehicles that cannot beat inflation, in vehicles that lose money. If you have money in your money market account, you lose purchasing power. It looks on your statement, it looks fine. But what you can spend every year is going to be deducted by the inflation rate. It's a very, very expensive proposition right now to keep money in cash. A lot of money that is invested in fixed income is invested in fixed income which has a yield that is lower than inflation rate. It's also losing money. So I think the first thing that I believe is going to happen is that this economy turns out to be fine, and people realize, oh my God, equities are going to be okay, but I'm stuck in vehicles that cannot beat inflation. I have to get into equities as well, because the value proposition of the equity market is 8% annual return, and 3 out of 4 years you are up. So I think this market is one driven by flows. Rational decision making by investors who say, I cannot be here parked in money market, parked in short-term fixed income, and expect to finance my dreams for my retirement for it. It's not, the numbers do not work. I know it feels risky, but equities might be safer than bonds at this point. Because with equities, you actually can beat inflation. So that's one driver of it. The other driver, and again, please be reminded that my track record on this is very, very poor. The other driver is, I believe, deglobalization is going to be a huge driver of growth. We tried globalization as a society, and it was worth a try, but it's a failure. And globalization has taken 4 hits. 4 hits. One is populism. Think about Trump, Brexit, Le Pen. Sort of this notion is our jobs went overseas, and I cannot live my dreams anymore if I used to work in a factory. People are angry. They want those jobs back, and they want some future and upside for their communities back. Second hit was supply chain difficulties that emerged during COVID. That our supply chains are too long, and we need things closer and more reliable. And then the third was Russia invading Ukraine. And the world realizes, well, maybe it's not a good idea to be energy dependent from Russia. Maybe it's not a good idea to have all our semiconductor companies in Taiwan. Maybe it's not a good idea to get all our drugs from China. Maybe it's not a good idea to have all our rare metals from China. Maybe we need this here, that if we are attacked, we can still build computers, rockets, arms, helicopters, nuclear plants. Maybe we need this all here. And I think there's rethinking going on every level. And the West is going to try to get energy independent. And it's a mixture on alternatives, LNG, traditional. It's all of the above strategy. We need to get food independent. We need to be independent in our commodities and natural resources. We need to get a lot of the supply chain closer to us. And to be able to afford this, we need to make big advances in automation, factory automation, warehouse automation, robotics, because our labor we don't have enough and it's very expensive. But the only way to afford it is to have drones and all of that stuff going in there. I had dinner a couple of weeks ago with the head of HR for Amazon, even though they have like 4 or 5 heads, with one of them. And 2 things emerged by that. One is they hire 1 million people a year. 1 million people a year. Can you imagine that? 1 million people a year. It's really stunning that they find 1 million people a year, right? That's one. But two, she also said that, well, because they have to pay so many higher wages right now, they have accelerated their warehouse automation programs, their self-driving trucks programs, their drone programs. This is the only way around it, right? The only way around it, that this is going to come. And there will be winners and losers there. But we have to reinvent our society, because we realize that the world is not completely a peaceful place, and we can't rely on everybody anytime. And I think that is going to drive a lot of investments. And a lot of investments will be financed by debt, but it will be under the national security headline. And I think that is going to be the story going forward, that we have to reinvent ourselves. And I think that with the flows is going to be sort of going to capture the imagination of equities investors and drive this market higher for 4 or 5 years. And at some point we'll have a bubble then, but we don't have it right now. So let me stop here. Thank you. And Terry and I have about 19 minutes for some questions. We can take it wherever you want. I'm sure there are other topics right now.
And I'm just up here to protect this microphone from Claus. I want my damage deposit back, so. I'm sure there are lots of questions out there. If I don't see hands going up, I've got several for Claus as well. But who wants to start?
Yes, sir.
Greg will start here.
Where did all these workers go? Where did they go?
How many
Are you talking about CPAs in particular? Or
I selfishly would, or greedily, would speak for myself.
Yeah.
But no, but where did they really go?
Okay, so let's put things together. You had about 3 million people who retired earlier than they normally would have. About 3.
And okay, how do they live?
They moved
Off the equity of their house?
well.
Off the stimulus payments? How do they live?
Household balance sheets are in pretty good shape. A lot of people have made a lot of money. And so Florida is booming. I was in Phoenix like 3 months ago. I think the whole state of Phoenix, I'm making this number up, but it's directly correct. The whole state of Phoenix, you're like 1,500 homes for sale. It's crazy. So that's one. So let me take your question a little bit further. Where did all the workers go? So 3 million retired. Then, I don't want to offend anybody, but our immigration policy basically cut down immigration significantly, okay? And if you wonder why food prices are up, well, who is going to pick your tomatoes and your raspberries and your salads right now? If you wonder why we don't build enough homes, who do you think works on construction, okay? So immigration is down. Then we made very, very generous transfer payments. We said, well, if you don't want to work because of COVID, we pay you 150% of what you made. And by the way, we are not going to evict you from our homes, and you don't have to pay your student debt down. Okay, these are the 3 factors that drove. That is our labor shortage. One is sort of demographics, one is the Republicans, and one is the Democrats. So it's all even, okay? But let's face it, that's what's driving inflation. And that's our decisions. Our decisions. It's not the Fed. This is where I'm on an island, okay? I don't think the Fed has almost anything to do with inflation. I think it's COVID and the supply chain issues. I think it's COVID because how we shifted our preferences on how to spend money from services to stuff. I think it's our policies. It's immigration, it's trade, it's generous transfer payments, and it's energy policy. That's why we have inflation. And for some reason, this is not being discussed. I don't understand it. But it's not the Fed. It's not the Fed.
It's a little bit.
It's a little bit the Fed, but it's number 5 maybe or number 6.
Klaus and I have already had this discussion, so, and it's
Yeah.
you know, I think COVID served, and the Fed's response to that, as a lot of things, an accelerator. So it highlighted or accelerated some of these demographic issues, the deglobalization issues, the energy issues, which were already happening. A lot of these energy issues were already happening, especially with the fight against climate change, right? That's inherently inflationary, and that's a structural shift. That's not going away. So it was kind of an accelerator, like a lot of other things. And then you've got the dual income households that one of the parents had to leave the workforce as well. But I think largely it's a demographic issue, and until the situation becomes that incents some of these folks to come out of retirement and enter the workforce, we're still going to have these pressures.
And this has started to happen. It has sort of started. You can see in the numbers some retirees are coming back. You can see that some dual homes, both parents are starting to work again. But it's a process. We're not there yet.
So are you saying then that inflation is? Are you saying inflation's transitory and it's going to come down by itself, or are you saying the Fed has a obligation to try to impact that, or are you saying that high inflation isn't that bad anyway?
I think inflation has peaked. Okay, so let me say this from up front. I think inflation has peaked. I think inflation is going to come down naturally, because the supply chain issues are sort of coming down, partly which is called the base effect. So, and the base effect is sort of what you measure inflation from. If you think about it, remember 15 months ago, oil was negative, oil prices were negative. Think about sort of what a jump of inflation means from negative oil prices to 80. But at some point, you just have a jump from 80 to 100. All of a sudden, that is not going to be that inflationary anymore because of the base effect. It's not, the base is now 80. So I think because of that, I think it's going to moderate, but it's probably going to be a little bit higher than over the last 20 years. It was around 2, right? Mm-hmm. 2. I think it probably will be more around between 3 and 3.5.
I think that's the important part, though. It's not the level of inflation, it's the level relative to expectations. And I think it's going to be higher than expectations, even expectations now. And it's because of what Klaus has been talking about. I mean, these issues are not all about the supply chain caused by COVID. You know, it's the structural issues, the deglobalization, the demographics. Baby boomers are net spenders and not net savers. And then the fight against climate change. And the Fed, and this is probably where we differ a little bit, the Fed has never been this far behind the curve in inflation. You could argue that the only way to get in front of it is to cause a recession. And politicians are really bad at wanting to cause recessions. And so I feel like they will blink and before they cause a recession, which will keep inflation not at 8%, but higher than we're used to. Doesn't mean we can't make money in that environment, and we can. It's a different type of investment that outperforms in that environment. So people have to change their thinking about how to take advantage of the environment. And I think most people haven't done that yet or aren't aware of what that looks like.
But if the first quarter GDP was negative, correct? Couldn't we technically be in a recession right now?
So what you should know about these numbers, they are estimates. Okay. This number is going to be revised for the next 10 years. Okay? This is sort of the first crack at it, and it's an estimate. So that's one. Number two is it was driven by two things: inventories and the trade deficit. Everything else was good. And inventories is a notoriously very, very noisy number, and it's very, very hard to measure. Consumer spending was very, very strong today. Sort of this number, I would ignore the number. It was garbage, okay? It's going to be revised, and I think we'll end up with a positive print in Q1. I'm pretty sure on that. But so don't get, these numbers are crazy. They're sort of real estimates. And once in a while, sort of in the fine print, sort of you see a release, oh, we released now Q2 of 2006 GDP, and nobody cares anymore. Yes, over there.
Hi, thank you. How do you view the cryptocurrency market and about Fidelity looking into putting it in the 401k plan?
Okay. So let me say sort of, there are two issues here. The one issue is we put it in a 401k plan because people would like it in a 401k plan. All right, this has been a pure business decision that if you have a tech company that has a 401k plan with you, doesn't go to Coinbase or something with their 401k plan because sort of Coinbase has it, we don't. And so it's a pure business decision to make this available for the clients who want it. So that's on sort of the business decision. On crypto itself, I can tell you the opinions within Fidelity are between 0 and it's going to be sort of the reserve currency of the world. You can find whatever you want to. My personal opinion is that I have not seen any good valuation tool. Right? I have no idea what a Bitcoin is worth. I have no idea. All right? Everything else I buy and sell, I can evaluate. But with Bitcoin, it has doesn't have any cash flow, doesn't have any dividends. I don't know what it's worth. And so I'm more on the skeptical side, okay? That this is going to be a good investment. But by the way, Terry and I do not agree on everything. We have had a lot of spirited debates. So, and sort of part of the reason why both of us wanted to be up here is give you two perspectives. So, Terry, you might have a different perspective.
We've lost a lot of hair thinking about this, actually. Yeah, when you were talking about there's no bubbles, we're not in a bubble. I mean, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, we might have been with certain asset classes, and I think we definitely were. Although Bitcoin every year has corrected at least 50% every year. So this is just Bitcoin. I'm not a fan. I'm trying to figure it out. You look around this room, and the average age here is not the folks driving Bitcoin, right? My son plays Fortnite and spends all my money, tries to, on these tokens in the game. You know, that's got real value to him. So our kids are growing up with this concept that this is not silly, and so it's something to think about and consider. The other thing that is interesting to me about Bitcoin, and I don't like to call them cryptocurrencies because a currency doesn't fluctuate 50% in a year, is just the wealth preservation aspect, the potential wealth preservation aspect of it. Do you think oligarchs in Russia are glad right now that they've got some Bitcoin when everything's getting confiscated from them? Or anybody in Ukraine when they thought they were getting invaded and you know that all of their assets were going to get confiscated? So I'm just playing around with it. You know, the families that we work with, we can do a lot to give them confidence around how they're going to pay their bills and preserve their lifestyle. Then it becomes, how do we solve for the zombie apocalypse kind of thing? And sometimes there's just comfort around there. Why do a lot of people have gold? It's not necessarily just the investment thesis. So I don't have a good answer for that yet, but I'm open to kind of seeing where this goes. And I know the government wants to regulate it, and that might hurt some of the effects on the wealth preservation side. But I think it's interesting. I don't think it's going away. Do you see one over here? Yeah.
Yeah, it's behind you.
I wonder if you could comment on central bank digital currencies. I know that there are quite a few in development now, mostly in the hypothetical stage. I think Canada just announced they're working with MIT on theirs. What kind of time frame do you think we can expect to start seeing those implemented by, well, any of the G20? And what impact do you think it'll have on individual investors like us?
So the space,
especially features like, for example, the programmability. Talking about the new concepts in money, such as programmability. What can you spend things? What can you spend your money on?
Yes.
How much can you spend on certain things? Based on behaviors that are, desirable versus undesirable.
So let me say up front that you probably have thought about this more than I have. So let me just say this up front. But I think what's going to happen is that everybody watches how China is handling that. Because China is really trying to basically get rid of cash and have every payment system electronically. And they obviously, because they're a dictatorship, they want to just see how, want to sort of control behaviors. And I think that's sort of what the Western banks are going, and Western central banks are going to look at, not necessarily from a controlling perspective, but how are they going to engineer that? And these are all bureaucrats, they are all risk averse. They want to see somebody else do it first. And so I think they will move a lot slower than you might think. There might be some academic thinking around it, but these are bureaucrats. They're not risking the $85,000 job a year to implement this, and then it's going to fail. So they want to see first how it's happening. And so I don't think it's an issue yet for you as an investor.
Well, I think you'll also, and I agree, you've probably thought about it more than we have, but when Bitcoin is at 60,000 or 100,000, you'll see a lot more attention and a lot more activity around that to kind of figure out how to combat it or compete. That's more likely to spur innovation there in the short term. In the long term, the answer is probably when our kids are running central banks. They're a lot more comfortable with this stuff, and I think it's inevitable at that point to have a solution. Got probably time for one or two more quick questions. We've answered them all. Oh.
I'll bring this back down to fundamentals, Klaus. There's an old economist adage that when the U.S. gets a cold, the rest of the world gets a flu.
Yes.
Gets the flu. So what's the inverse thinking on that? If China and Europe, Eastern Europe altogether, go into the recession, what's the impact on the U.S. markets from that standpoint? Certainly deglobalization could insulate us from that, but deglobalization at this extent takes time.
Yeah. I would argue that emerging markets have already bottomed, and that China is closer to coming out of recession than going in. So I think that move is already up. I think Europe has underperformed for the last 20 years, and so the US doesn't really need Europe to work. And look, we are really lucky here. Okay? We have an ocean there, we have an ocean over there, we have Canada there, we have Mexico there. Nobody's going to attack us. We are energy independent, we are food independent, we have enough water. If we combine Canada and Mexico together, we have everything we need. And so in terms of crises, I think, if something, let's say something horrible would happen and Putin drops a tactical nuclear weapon on Kiev, all the money out of Europe comes here. That's going to be sort of the area where money goes, because we are based on our geography and our history, we are really, really lucky here.
We'll leave it there. That's a good one to end on. But we'll be around obviously in break and afterwards. And thank you all. Thank you, Klaus. Appreciate it. That's great. Thank you. This is a real treat for me. I've been following this guy and a fan for quite some time. We used to work in the same building. I don't know. He must have ridden a different elevator than me, though. I didn't get the key to that one. Naveen, and I'm gonna give quite an introduction here to him because it's impressive and he deserves it. He's an intensely curious entrepreneur and philanthropist who focuses on ideas that push humanity forward. From humble roots in New Delhi to his home right here on the shores of Lake Washington, Naveen sees beyond the current business and technological landscape, creating companies that make a true impact. After graduating from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology, he began his career in the US at a company called Burroughs, which later became Unisys. Naveen eventually worked his way west to work at Microsoft in 1989, where he still holds a number of patents through his work with Windows 95 and other systems. In 1996, he founded a company called InfoSpace here in Bellevue, which many of you remember provided content services to websites and mobile devices. And that was obviously groundbreaking at that point. Now we take it for granted. From there, he went on to start a number of successful companies, including Intellius and TalentWise, started them and sold them. You've all received or will receive a copy out there of his award-winning book, Moonshots, Creating a World of Abundance. His current moonshots are Viome and Moon Express. Moon Express is the only company globally with permission to harvest resources from the moon, developing the infrastructure needed to push humanity towards a true planetary society. Viome's singular mission is just simply to make illness optional. Viome has built an AI-driven platform that analyzes the interaction between food, our microbiome, our human cells to develop precision nutrition to prevent and reverse chronic disease concerns, cancers, and aging. As you can see, Naveen doesn't mess around with small goals. Naveen has been the recipient of many honors for his entrepreneurial success. These include Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernst & Young, Most Creative Person by Fast Company, Top 20 Entrepreneurs and Lifetime Achievement Awards for Leadership by Red Herring, and Medal of Honor by Ellis Island, and Top 50 Philanthropists by Town & Country magazine. Naveen will tell you, however, that his greatest success is his family, wife Anu, who's here and who joins us, and children Ankur, Priyanka, and Neil. Please welcome to the stage Naveen Jain.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
How was your commute?
My commute was actually long. It took me almost 10 minutes to walk here.
I was joking with him. He speaks all over the world, and this is one engagement that he got to wake up in his own bed and walk from his office. So, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Terry.
So before we kind of get on our theme and talk about the incredible work that you're doing with Viome and the mission there, I wanted to get your perspective on a couple of topics that we've been discussing today. I've heard you talk on these topics before, and I know you've got a very interesting opinion. We talked earlier about purpose and legacy, and you've talked famously about finding purpose and even turning purpose into an obsession. That's what a successful entrepreneur does. In your experience, is purpose something that one can seek out and find, or does purpose find us?
Well, I think it's not it is something you have to truly want to do. And it's really simple. Ask yourself, what are you willing to die for? And then live for it, right? Ask yourself, if you had everything in life that you want, what would you do? And if you do that, you'll find everything that you want in your life. It is not about a passion. Passion is for losers. Passion is for hobbies. The true entrepreneurs, the people with a purpose, have obsession. They go to sleep wanting to solve the problem, and they jump out of the bed wanting to solve the problem. So the one way I know you know that what you're working on is not your passion is very simple. When you wake up in the morning and you don't jump out of the bed and you want to still lie around for 5 more minutes, whatever you're doing, you should quit because that's not your purpose.
That's the measurement.
Yeah.
All right. I got to rethink that. So I've always wanted to talk to you about, and we could have a whole nother hour on this topic, but when I think of legacy, my mind immediately goes to my kids. You know, when you're building a legacy, there's lots of ways and definitions. You've written and spoken a great deal about your kids and how you've instilled in them some of these same values that you just talked about. What would you tell folks who worry about raising children around wealth and what that creates, and fearful, and I get it, to create a disincentive to work hard?
Of course. So I think this is a really interesting. Your legacy is not defined by you, what you do, or your kids, actually. It's defined simply by how many lives you improve in your lifetime. So your success will never be measured by how much money you have in the bank. It's going to be measured by how many lives you improve while you're still alive. Right? Now, that actually is a leverage you have. That means if you can have children who continue to find that purpose of improving people's life, you continue your legacy. If you find kids that are actually not doing that, then your legacy is already done. So it's simply about not telling children what to do, show them what you do. And that's fundamentally what happens as a parent, is we all make the same mistake. We tell our children to work hard. We tell our children to go find the real purpose in life. And when we make enough money, we want to retire and sit at home and want to spend the time with our children. That is a selfish thing to do to destroy your own kids. Because here's what happens. When you do that when you are young and want to sit at home because you want to spend time with the children, now imagine what the children see. They go to school watching their dad sitting on the sofa watching CNBC. They come back from school. The dad says, go to your room, work hard, get your homework done. Hard work is what it takes. And what they see is dad sitting on the sofa and watching CNBC. They want to grow up just like their dad. They want to sit on the sofa and watch CNBC. Right? Instead, you don't tell them. You go out and do what you want your kids to be doing. They see you do things. They don't hear what you say. Right? So when you ask yourself, why my kids are not becoming entrepreneurs? Ask yourself why. When you are working for a corporate, going home every day, bitching about your boss, and still go back to work the next day, and telling your kids they should be entrepreneur, they say, Dad, I want to be just like you. I want to go to a corporate, bitch about my boss, and come home. Right? That's what they're going to do. Now, another part I was going to just say that, and I think probably not a very popular thing to say, but I'm not here to be popular. Which is, I heard a lot of people talking about, hey, you grow up poor and you have this hunger and you want to go out and do things. Now your children are being raised in an affluent family. How do you convey that same meaning to them? So what you do is we're going to make them suffer the same way we did. Because that's how it's going to teach them everything. And I look at think, oh my God, what a terrible parent you must be. Because think about it. Just look at yourself. You had nothing. You were at the ground. You work hard and you got to be this high. You ask your kids, go back to the ground and go back and start all over again. Maybe they are smarter than you because they have seen you, and maybe they'll go up to here. Imagine if you gave them the platform to start from where you are and have them embrace who they are. Give them a platform so they can go to the moon and know that there is nothing can stop them. Now, I can give you all the stories of my life, how they did. So after my first company was wildly successful, I could have sat at home and told the kids, you know what? Dad wants to spend the time with the young children. Dad did not do that. Dad did not say that money matters, money doesn't matter. Dad showed them money doesn't matter. So go to start a second company and a third company. And then dad goes nuts and says, we're going to go to the moon. We're going to set up a base on the moon. Dad, you are crazy. No private company has ever done that. What makes you think you can? Well, let's go do that and find out what happens. And then we get a $2.6 billion NASA contract to go to the moon. My God, it can be done. Now, the dad is almost now 60 years old. Dad decides he wants to go start another company, and this time he's going to take even more audacious thing about solving the healthcare problem around chronic diseases. Kids were old enough now, they wanted to have a family meeting to decide that dad, it's time to retire. Time for dad to ride in the sunset, because you don't want to be doing it and fail. You have a great career, you have had a great success, maybe it's time for you to retire. Dad talks about this microbiome thing happening, and they all look at each other. I think dad has gone senile. Well, looks like to me the kids, I haven't taught you much here, so let me start you one more time, and I'm going to start yet another company and show you how this is done. And now, every one of them out there, our oldest graduated from Wharton, starts his first company, and now he's on to his third unicorn. Builds out around the same concept. How do you take affordability and provide the solutions to the problem? And one day, I'm going to tell you the whole things, how you think about starting something. It is a really simple thing. Ask yourself, whatever the things you're doing, God forbid you're actually successful in solving that problem. Would it help 1 billion people live a better life? And when you do that, it's not because you're a philanthropist. You are a capitalist. Because if you can build anything, any product, any service that improves 1 billion people's life, you can create a $100 billion, $500 billion company. But you don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to create a $100 billion company. What should I do? Sell drugs, marijuana, I don't know. Point is, you only focus on improving people's lives. And that's, if you do that, everything will come up. Making money is a byproduct of improving people's lives, right? So our oldest decided that he sees his generation graduating from college have two problems. Number one problem, they go to an apartment, they got a job, they can pay for the apartment rent, but they don't have money saved to pay the first month, last month, and the deposit. Got to ask the mom and dad for it. They said, no, what if I can start a simple insurance, $5 a month to insure the landlord so you don't have to pay the deposit anymore? And he built that company, went on to become a unicorn. Looks at the second problem, he said, Dad, every one of us are constantly complaining that we pay the rent and we get nothing for it. So he started a company called Wildt, B-I-L-T. You gives a credit card to everyone. You can pay your rent on a credit card. Landlord gets a full money, no credit card fees. Renter gets the points that you earn on a card. You can use the points to go on airlines, one-to-one, whether it's United American or anything else, or you can use the points to pay the rent for the next month. Simply looking at the problem that needed to be solved, and he solved that. Now it's another unicorn. Our daughter graduated from Stanford, started the first company to use AI to remove the gender bias. It started now the second company on women's health, Evvy, E-V-V-Y. So everyone here, if you have a wife, daughter, go sign up for Evvy. Every woman, sign up for Evvy. Find your neighbor, sign up for Evvy. That's our daughter's company, all about women's health. Our youngest one graduated from also Stanford, and he's a Schwarzman scholar, and he's now doing a fintech company. So idea is every one of them started to do the same thing, solving a big problem, right? So point I'm trying to make is that we did not tell our children that we want them to suffer. We want them to go to the best colleges, never have to work in the summer. We told them, go learn something during the summer. Don't work during the summer. This is the time for you to learn things. Go find what excites you. Go out and take on the audacious ideas to solve the problem. Giving the more, let me give you one more point, and I'm going to come back to you. When they are young and you make them suffer, what you're telling them is, Dad and Mom go out and have fun because they have money. They are making me go out and do the job at the gas station because money matters. And all their life, all they do is chase money. You let them know money matters, it matters. You let them know money has no meaning, they know the money has no meaning. When you show them that you control their freedom by not giving them money. All their life, they chase money to buy the freedom. When you tell them the freedom comes from a purpose, finding a passion and a purpose in life, they chase that. And that's what you have to think about. Don't use money as a motivation, because they will be chasing money for the rest of their life if you do that. Anyway, I'm not sure that's what you wanted to hear.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Yeah, and I think.
Do you guys agree or disagree? How many guys agree? Raise your hands. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And I want to pivot to a couple of your moonshots here. And I want to hear a little bit about your background. Let's see, there's Moon Express and there's Viome. So talk to me about all of your time you spent in NASA and in medical school.
Yes, it's a very interesting thing that, every one of us has this idea that when you want to go do something, you always ask, I know nothing about it. How can I do this, right? And to me, that is the biggest asset you're going to have, is because you know nothing about it. When you become an expert at anything, you become useless. And here is why I say that. You become an incrementalist. That means the best you can be is 10% better than anybody in the world. Like Terry, you can be the best damn investment person, 10% better than anybody in the world, but you'll never be 10 times better than anybody in the world. To be 10 times better, you have to challenge the foundation of what every single expert has taken it for granted. To challenge that, you have to believe you know nothing, and you're willing to say, why? You become a 2-year-old. Ask yourself, why? Why? Why does it have to be that way? And when you question that, suddenly you find that it doesn't need to be like that. Right? If you look at every industry, bar none, is disrupted by someone who came from outside the industry. You look at the rocket industry. No aerospace company says the rocket goes up, never comes down. Someone comes from the internet background, he said, shit goes up, why can't we just rescue it and bring it back? I mean, that's literally how they think. Why does it have to be like that? And that is, to me, is what disrupts an industry. Nobody in the automotive industry says, sure, we can do electric car. Someone from outside the industry builds an electric car. You look at the taxi industry, wasn't disrupted by somebody in the taxi industry. Uber came along and disrupted that. You look at the hotel industry, wasn't the Hyatt and Sheraton. It was Airbnb who did that, right? I can go on and on and on. It is never the experts who will disrupt the industry because they think they already know what works. It is someone who comes from outside, says, why does it have to be this way? And next thing you know, the world had changed. So if you want to change the way people live their life, if you want to change the trajectory of how humanity is going to live in the future, you have to think differently. You have to be able to go out of your comfort zone and do something that you know nothing about.
That's fantastic. And I can't think of an industry that most of us would rather see disrupted than the healthcare industry.
Yep.
And the medical,
Yep.
conventional medical industry. So as we pivot towards Viome, can you talk about that moonshot and what brought you to start Viome?
Well, every decade or so, ask myself question, what am I willing to dedicate 10, 15 years of my life to? And what are the biggest problems that I want to actually start to look at solving? I don't ask myself, what do I know about this? I simply look and say, what are the problems if I could solve would somehow change everything the way people live, right? I looked at, I was doing this Moon Express, looking at the moon base, and thought, all the fun stuff that needed to be done is done. And I'm waking up in the morning, not jumping out of the bed. I'm thinking, time to quit. Time to go do something else. And now I start thinking, what would I do next after that you do the moonshot? What do you do as for an encore? You do another moonshot, symbolic moonshot. And I thought maybe the biggest problems are what? Education, healthcare, energy, and agriculture. What do I do? And I started to look at both. Education is a big problem, healthcare is a big problem. And it turns out both are really very similar in some sense. In both cases, people think both are broken systems. Well, it turns out neither of the system is actually broken. they're doing exactly what they were designed to do. Our needs today are very different. So education system was designed to teach us skills, and in the industrial era, you learn some skill and you use that for the rest of your life, and it was good. Now we're living in this world of exponential technology that by the time you graduate, whatever you have learned, it becomes obsolete. So now the education system has to be designed for something different, which is learning to learn, learning to solve problems, learning to be multidisciplinary, learning to be a team player. In our education system, if there is a problem, there is a multiple answers. If you say there may be 2 right answers, they say no. There is always only one right answer to every problem. Think about that when you are at work. You say there's only one right answer to this problem. Answer, there are many different ways of solving the problem. When you are sitting in a class and you ask your neighbor, hey, what do you think of the answer here? They think you're cheating. You do the same thing at work, you're a team player. Right? My point is we're teaching the kids all the wrong things that they need to succeed at work. Right? Point was, anyway, I looked at healthcare, and to me it was just so fascinating. And I saw that we as humans haven't changed as a species, yet younger and younger people are getting sicker. More and more people are getting more diseases. People are getting obesity, diabetes, heart diseases, depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. Why is it that's happening? Because there is no reason for us to be happening that. So I say, well, what if? And this is where the world starts. You ask yourself, what if we can prevent from these diseases from happening? What if we can reverse them from when they happen? And you don't ask yourself, how the hell are you going to do that? You say, what if I could do that? Would it help 1 billion people live a better life? The answer is 7.4 billion people. If you can do that, that will change the game. Great, let's go do that then. And now the question comes, why are you the right person to be solving this problem? And there is an in-between step that's called why now. Is now the right time to do that? But let's skip for a second. Why me is really the trick here. What question am I asking that are different from what everyone else in the industry is asking? Because the question you ask is the problem you solve. And I can give you an example, by the way, in multiple industry, this is not something one. So I'm going to give you an example in the aerospace industry, and I'm going to give you in the healthcare industry. And I'm going to show you how actually you can start to think like that. So at Moon Express, we used to say, we're going to go settle on the moon. And every time somebody could say, fine, let's believe you can do that. How are you going to grow the food on the moon? Not a bad question, except it's a dumb question, right? Because when you ask someone, how are you going to grow the food on the moon, the only solution is to find a way to grow the food on the moon. What if you ask a slightly different question? Why do we eat food? Just by asking that question, why do we eat food, suddenly you realize the only reason we need food is for energy and for nutrition. What if we can get energy from photosynthesis like the plants do? What if we can get energy like the bacteria that grow in the radioactive nuclear waste? They grow up in radiation. Maybe radiation is a source of energy. But the point is, just by asking a different question, now you have 10 different ways of solving that problem that couldn't have been solved other than growing the food. And that's the power of asking a different question. Now, in the healthcare world, it was really simple for me. Everyone in the industry was asking the same question. I want to know about your DNA. I want to know about your genes, because that's what's really causing you to be sick. And I am no scientist. I don't know background in medical degree. But I do remember my high school biology that says your DNA never changes. We all know that you do your DNA, it never changes, right? And I thought, imagine that. Somebody did my DNA test, and I gained 400 pounds. My DNA is still the same. I get diabetes, my DNA is still the same. I get heart attack, my DNA is still the same. And then I die. And you do my DNA 10 years after I die, it's still the same. You can look at the DNA of the dinosaurs from 65 million years ago. If DNA can't even tell you you're dead or alive, how the hell it will tell you you're healthy or sick? And I'm thinking, that's really bogus. If DNA is not changing when you become sick, how can you blame it for being sick, right? And really interesting, these guys who are just brilliant, most brilliant guy, There was a guy who came to me and said, I want you to invest in my company. I said, what are you doing? We are looking at Alzheimer. We have found the gene that causes Alzheimer. And I said, really exciting. So tell me about this gene. And he said, this is a gene called SORL1. Awesome. I said, am I born with that? Of course you're born with that. So the gene just sits there in my body for 60 years. And one day it wakes up and says, God damn it, I'm sick and tired of waiting. I need to wipe out this guy's memory right now. Right? Really? He just wakes up one day and says, I'm going to wipe out your memory. And he looks at me, he says, you're right, it can't happen that way. And I said, so I said, so what does the gene do? And he says, I don't know, but we see that. And I said, maybe it gets triggered by something that causes it to do something different. And maybe that's what causes it. Yeah, you're right, there is a trigger there. I say, if I take the trigger away, does it matter what genes I have? And he said, you're right. So I said, there is no Alzheimer's gene. The trigger is a gene. Right? So all you need to worry about is what is the trigger that causes you to have that. And my point is, only a dumb guy who doesn't know the science will ask that question, right? Because nobody else would call that. Of course you got a gene that it causes Alzheimer's, right? My point was, that basic kind of questioning, like a 2-year-old why, gets you to think differently. So now I understand the DNA is not the problem. So I go to the Khan Academy. What happens from the DNA? And it says DNA makes RNA. Your genes get expressed. And when genes get expressed, they do very different things. That I get it. When we are born, I'm watching my time, so don't you worry. I'm telling this.
I'm not worried.
I'm
here.
telling my.
Yeah.
So think about it. I'm going to explain to you in a simple layman way that how I thought about it. When we are born, single cell, right? Mom's egg, that sperm called zygote. And from there it is split, we become human being. Every part of our body is identical, the same DNA. So you look at my hair, my skin, my nose, my eyes, my nails, my fingers, same DNA. Why is it we don't have the eyes growing on my finger and the nails growing on my head? Same DNA. Why is that? Well, some genes are overexpressed, some genes become underexpressed, same DNA. It's like an alphabet. Genes are like your alphabet. They can write any story you want it to write. They can make it eyes, they can make it nails. So depending on what genes are turned on, what genes are turned off, they become nail. Other genes get turned on, turned off, they become eye. In my opinion, that was a simple solution. Why not measure what they are expressing instead of what the genes are, and we can solve that problem. So my first reaction was, you know what, guys? It is really simple. We are going to go measure gene expression called RNA. And now everyone knows that 4-letter word that became really popular in the COVID time. Anybody knows what that letter is? 4-letter word? mRNA. The gentleman is right. The 4-letter word that no one knew before COVID is mRNA. 6 years ago, I didn't know what mRNA was, but we knew we were going to measure that sucker. Right? That RNA thingy is really important. We're going to measure that. Nobody ever told me that nobody has ever measured RNA. So how are you going to do that? We'll come to that in a second. The second part was we say, okay, guys, if we can somehow figure that out, would that solve the problem? And people say, no. And I say, I thought I just solved the world hunger. What is missing? What am I missing? Well, here is what I was missing. They say, it turns out, of all the genes in our human body, 99% don't come from a mom and dad. Holy cow, where do they come from now? Well, after you are born, this thing called microbiome, that's a new term I'm hearing, microbiome. What is it? 100 trillion of them, they live in our gut, in our mouth, all over us. 100 trillion. They are 2 million to 20 million genes compared to our 20,000 human genes. We are like a walking, talking ecosystem inside us. What these microbes, they are no parasite. They are the one that actually keep us healthy. When we eat food, in fact, humans have outsourced most of our capabilities to these guys. Now, one could argue they actually created us, right? They've been in this planet 3.5 billion years before the humans were born. They may have just created us to carry them around so we can poop everywhere and spread them around, right? They live in our gut. That's where you find them, right? But in all seriousness, we feed them, and they actually eat the food we give them like fiber, when we eat all the fibers, we cannot digest fiber. We go to them, and they produce something called short-chain fatty acid, butyrate, acetate, propionate. These are the things that our body needs, vitamins. All the stuff we need, they produce it for us. And it's really simple. We feed them wrong thing, they feed us the wrong thing. They make us sick. So in some sense, so I start Googling, what is this microbiome thing? So I Google obesity and microbiome. By the way, you guys should do that too, by the way, when you go home. Anxiety and microbiome, depression and microbiome, Alzheimer and microbiome, Parkinson's and microbiome. Every single disease is connected to this microbiome thing. I shook my head, I'm thinking, holy cow, eureka. And then it occurred to me, you must be a complete moron. If everyone believes the same thing, and there are tens of companies doing microbiome testing, why is this problem not solved yet then? Then I went back to my basic principle. What dumb question are these companies asking when the problem's not getting solved? They must be asking a wrong question. And it turns out every single company to date is asking exactly the same question. They want to know what organisms are in Terry's gut, what organisms are in Gary's gut, and they can find out, if they can find out two people who have diabetes, they can find out what organisms are there, they can find the problem. Same thing like a genes. And I'm thinking, no. I don't know what this microbiome thing is. They're probably like tiny humans. If they're tiny humans, they could be 10,000 of the different organisms producing the same thing that's making me sick. Or the same organism can do one thing good in someone's good environment and do something bad in some other environment, because bad environment. Take a person, put them in a good environment, good behavior, put them in a bad environment, bad behavior. So what matters is what they are producing, not who they are. And that is how we're going to solve the problem. Literally, that's the only thing I knew. And from that, I started looking for the technology that can help me do that. Went around everywhere in the country, went to NASA, thinking they're going to the Mars, they should have solved this problem. So I'm literally at NASA JPL, asking them, how do you solve the problem? And the scientists saying, we don't really know how to do this because we don't really care. All we want to know is there is some organism there. We don't really care what they're doing. And we have no solutions. I'm thinking, you're a bunch of morons. I got to go to NASA headquarters, Houston. That's where they have all the great stuff. Went to NASA Houston, touched all the moon rocks, had all the fun. It's still no technology. I'm thinking, God. Went to Kennedy Space Center. It's still no luck. Now I'm thinking national labs, which is all the science gets done. So I'm Lawrence Berkeley, Lawrence Livermore. I'm making some progress, thinking it's doable, but we have not done it yet. I am now at Los Alamos National Lab. Anyone here knows what Los Alamos National Lab is famous for? Thank you, sir. Atomic bomb. These guys know their shit. So now I'm thinking, they got to have something there. So I am there now. I'm become much bolder. I'm thinking this is problem probably can't be solved, so I can put some money behind it now. So I said, I got $100,000 burning hole in my pocket. I'm going to give it to a scientist who can tell me how to solve this problem. But 20 or 30 scientists are now presenting to me. One guy comes up to me and says, you know what? I can tell you exactly how it can be done. I sat him down and said, tell me, what project are you working on? And the guy looks at me and says, what's your security clearance level? And then he said, don't answer me. And I said, why? He said, even if you told me from CIA, your security clearance is not big enough for me to tell you what project I'm working on. I look at him and I said, bullshit. And I said, I don't need to know what you're working on. Can you tell me how it works? And he said, that I can. And now he's describing to me exactly how he does it. I'm taking furious notes. And I took all the notes, and then I went back to Lawrence Berkeley. And I said, hey, I figured out how to do this. If I were to do this, and this, would this work? And he said, if you can do that, that will work. And I would go back to Los Alamos. I'm thinking, all right, guy, looks to me what you have is good. I'm going to license it. And try taking the technology out of government lab, and especially when you want exclusive license. Good luck. Someday when I have more time, I'll tell you that how I managed to get a perpetual exclusive license to it. Right? Did that, and that was 6.5 years ago. And then I created this company called Vio. Now we have analyzed over 350,000 people. And there, I think the kit outside that you're raffling out, some people may have gotten it. You take a test at home, a touch of your stool, 4 drops of your blood, and very soon we are coming up with a new version, just a spit of your saliva. And when you do that, you send the things back to us. You don't have to go to any place, just all at home. Comes right back within a week on your app. It shows you what's happening inside your body. So it tells you what's your biological age. That means not how old you are. How old are you biologically? So for example, I am 63 chronologically. My biological age is now down to 50. That means I have reversed 13 years of my age. And it shows. When I go up, I run 2 stairs at a time. I couldn't do that when I was 50. I am better off today than I was when I was 50. Right? And my hope is when I turn 70, my biological age will be down to 40. So my sweet wife thinks that she married a young man. Right? So that's how I keep her in check. She always marries a younger man. It tells you what's your immune health. That means, God forbid you catch cold, flu, or the C word that we are never going to mention, how well are you protected? Your cellular health, your mitochondrial health. It tells you about your gut health. It gives you your oral health, the new product that we're launching, your heart health, your cognitive health, all these things, and then we don't say, and good luck. Then we tell you, here is what you need to do. Don't eat these foods, and here is why. So we tell you, don't eat broccoli and Brussels sprouts. You may think they're healthy for you, but your sulfide production in your gut is too high. They're causing inflammation. Don't eat broccoli and Brussels sprout. Even though Popeye told you spinach is healthy for everyone, I'm telling you spinach is no good for you right now because your oxalic acid is not being metabolized, and spinach is very high in oxalate. We are noticing that you have a lot of ammonia being produced causing inflammation in your body, and it's coming from protein fermentation. That means you're eating too much protein, so either cut down the protein or take a digestive enzyme with your protein. And then we come back and say, I hope you're not taking vitamin B3 right now because your uric acid is too high, it is going to turn into a gout. Or don't take a lot of turmeric right now because your bile acid is too high. And if you're thinking you're going to live long by taking NAD or NR or NMN, you're going to actually live shorter life because your cellular senescence is too high. It's not good for you. But you do need, every single day, you should take 22 milligram of elderberry. You should take 27 milligram of berberine. You should take 29 milligram from amylase. And we tell you every vitamin, mineral, herbs, digestive enzyme, amino acid, probiotic, prebiotic, what you need. And then we go a step further. We make it for you. Only those ingredients with that quantity and made for you every single month. There is no pre-made stuff. We literally have like a compounding pharmacy robotic. And we say, this is being made for Terry. He needs, go to bin 27, take 12 milligram. Go to bin 22, take 11 milligram. Put them in a powder, put them in a capsule, put them in a sachet, and send it to him.
So it's not the whole handful of supplements I take every morning?
No. And only the things you need, nothing that's going to harm you, and nothing's going to make you pee, just simply pee them out, right? And so that's basically what we do. That's part of our first part of our business. This now, having analyzed 350,000 people, there is not a day goes by. People say, you saved my life. I used to have eczema. I no longer have it. Acne. I've lost weight. I no longer am a diabetic. My anxiety is completely gone. I'm no longer depressed. I sleep better than I've ever done. And I used to have bloating and stomach ache. I used to have all types of constipation, diarrhea. It's all gone. Now, tell you seriousness, I got my mom, which is really hard because mom thinks that son is not a doctor. How he's going to tell me what to do? Got her to do the test. My mom is 82. She's been taking these many drugs. And just in the last 4 months, I was just talking to her 2 weeks ago, and she said, I went to my lung doctor. And she said, I don't need the inhaler anymore because my lung thing is gone. And she said, I've never had, used to be always constipated. It's all gone. Now, to me, honestly, God, even if the company fails, just the fact that I cured my mom to be a place where she is better, that's good enough for me, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that you focus on things that matter. But that's just the first part of preventing people from getting sick. From learning from all these people, we were able to determine now why people are developing cancer. So we went to FDA, and we told them we can actually detect stage 1 oral cancer, stage 1 throat cancer with a spit on a saliva. And we actually showed them all the data. And we received the breakthrough device designation for detecting cancer. And what that meant was FDA telling us they have never seen anything like this, and it's going to save lives. And we are launching that now, next month, as a cancer detect program. It's starting with the mouth, throat, and then going down. We're currently researching. In fact, just signed the deal 2 hours ago with Washington GI to look at colorectal cancer, stomach cancer, and esophageal cancers. Right? We are working on breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, and prostate cancer. Right? Our hope is that within a decade, we will be able to solve the problem of the cancer and get rid of this cancer from humanity completely. Right? That, to me, is a win. And now we're going to do the same thing with IBD. All the diseases that we're starting to see, we can detect them early. And then we went one next step. We said, what if somebody already has a disease? What do we do about it? So we actually currently signed 2 contracts already with GSK. One is to develop a vaccine against an autoimmune disease and another vaccine against a colorectal cancer. We showed them exactly what is causing people to develop this cancer. And they said, we can develop a vaccine for it. Right? Now, if that happens, imagine someone who didn't even know what DNA was, is doing things that no one in the industry that has been a scientist and a doctor was willing to take on. It is because they never thought this was possible. They never thought someone could analyze the data. I come from a software background. To me, if I can analyze and know exactly what's going on in your body and you're sick, eventually, if you have enough people, you'll be able to build a machine learning model that will show you this is exactly what's going on in the people who are sick versus people who are not sick, right? And that, to me, was how I looked at it. To me, it was a big data problem. It wasn't a medical problem. It was simply a big data problem that I know how to solve. Right? That is the power of thinking differently. So with that, I'm going to actually shut up, which is really hard for me to do. But let you possibly ask me questions, because I don't want Terry to be asking me, because he asks me tough questions.
I forgot the question, actually.
Yeah. So I was thinking of maybe have you guys, since there are about 20 minutes and 32 seconds, to see if you have any questions. If not, I go back to Terry as my backup. Yes, ma'am.
Nope.
Have you done any clinical studies?
Yes. Go ahead.
And what stage are you at with that?
Yes. So we have actually done several types of clinical studies that currently with Advent Health, we have Mayo Clinic. We are also working with Mount Sinai, New York Medical College, and I was telling you about the Washington GI. So there are a couple of things. We use our customers themselves are clinical trials, right? Because we actually measure them on time 1 and time 2. So if you do a test today and you do a test 6 months from now, we can see what changes have happened. And we actually published a paper, ma'am, on that, which we showed the people who followed our recommendations for 4 months, their depression score came down by 36%, measured by a clinical score called PHQ-9. Their anxiety score measured by GAD-7 came down by 32%. Their diabetes score measured by HbA1c came down by 30%. And their IBS, which is stomach ache and the IBS symptoms, the IBS SSS score came down by 40%. So these are published results that we published them in a peer-reviewed journal.
How big was the population?
So our population is 350,000 people, and this particular thing was measured by 17,500 people. Yes, ma'am.
How often do we need to get retested?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So in terms of people always ask that, we tune our car every year, and somehow we think our body just needs to be tuned once, right? We recommend every 6 months that we should retest, because what happens is when you change your diet and you take the supplements, your body adapts to them, and suddenly the things are changed, and you don't want to keep taking them because that will become bad. So the foods that are bad for you actually may become good for you because your body has adapted now, right? So so every 6 months you should retest, and you can actually see your scores change. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm enjoying this conversation immensely, and I am blown away. I'm probably disturbing my table mates because I'm like, oh my God, with everything that you're saying. So kudos to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, you are disrupting quite a number of industries. And I think just with Biome,
Yep.
I can think of pharma,
Hmm?
and I can also think of kind of food,
Yep.
right? How are you handling those conversations of what I would say are your potential
Sure.
leaders?
Well, actually, no. So you co-opt them, right? You essentially have to show the world is moving in that direction. Once you start to show people, it is inevitable. And once they see the inevitability of something, you are able to partner with them, right? So when we go to the grocery chain, and I can't name names, we went to them and said, think about it. When we recommend some food to the people that are good for them, you can be part of the journey. You can give them a higher discount for the superfoods that are good for them and give them no discount for the foods to avoid. So we tell you, by the way, here are the foods that are good for you and here is why. Here are the foods that are bad for you and here is why. Here are the foods, superfoods, enjoy foods, minimize food, and avoid foods. 10% discount on superfood, 5% discount on enjoy food, 2% discount on minimize food, and 0 discount on avoid food. Now, you're still people need to food, but now they know what to eat. In the pharma companies, we went to them and said, look, we can show you the data about what needs to be done. Now you can have a cure for something you had no say in it, right? So GSK had no play in a colorectal cancer. So we go to them and say, now you can be a player. If I go to Merck, they're already playing this. I got a Keytruda. I don't want this thing. So we go to the players who have absolutely no stake here, and you say, now you can be a player here. So you essentially can find a partner rather than actually compete. Because I don't want to die by these haters.
I would add to that. I mean, Naveen is the eternal optimist too, right? And when you are disrupting, there's some that are going to take exception to the status quo and whatnot. I know through my work with functional medicine, we've seen that in the conventional machine.
Oh God, they hate you.
Yeah.
And by the way, most doctors don't believe that food is a medicine. That's really interesting. Every doctor has to take a Hippocratic oath, right? And one of the things Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be the food. And you know what he said? All diseases begin in the gut. And you ask the doctor, hey, doc, what do you think about my gut? And do you think the food might work? And he looks at you, he's like, are you crazy? What are you talking about? I mean, in fact, they're so bad. I can give you an example. Like my wife, she takes supplements. She went to her GYN doctor. And her doctor says, when you stop doing this voodoo stuff, come talk to me. When you stop taking these supplements. I mean, think about that. That is the kind of things we're dealing with because they're never taught about nutrition. Medical college does not teach nutrition. I was by the way, meeting with the dean of the medical school in Florida. She says she introduced a course on nutrition for her medical student. She got a letter from the certifying authority that her accreditation is going to be taken away if she's going to start teaching stuff that is not about prescribing the pills. Think about that for a second.
There's a question back
Give
here.
me the ill, I'll give you the pill.
Right back here.
What is the cost for the diagnostic test?
So the cost for the Viome test that you do for at home, it is anywhere between $149 and $199 is for the health intelligence. The new test that we're coming out will be about $249. And the supplements are, if you want all the probiotics and prebiotics only, is $49. Just the supplements, $99 combined together is $149. And by the way, that is, if you were to just get those ingredients on Amazon, it'll cost you about $2,000. And our diagnosis, just to complete the question, the cancer detect test is going to be also about $299 or something like that. Yes, ma'am.
Will the biome help with hormones?
Actually, it does. Yeah, actually, we look at all this. I mean, the truth is, that's one of the things is, at the end of the day, your body is not separate, which is really people think about heart as separate as their kidney and the lung and the gut. They're all interconnected. Our mind, our brain, and a gut are connected through the vagus nerve. In fact, most people who are autistic also have the gut issues. Most people, when they're depressed, they eat. Right? So gut actually controls a lot of the stuff that happens in our body. The gut-heart axis. Just Google gut-kidney axis, gut-skin axis. So just Google and you'll see that it's all interconnected, or what's happening in one part of the body impacts everything else. So yes, it does impact hormones and vitamins. Yes, sir.
It's about adoption.
Yeah.
Whenever you're talking about disruption, there's always a period of people have to get used to before get adjusted. So where do you see adoption?
Yeah, again, so it's really, the adoption comes from every person who does the test, gets better, and buys it for the whole family. So that's literally 70% of our customers come because someone recommended them. They say, my sister took a test, her life changed, and now she's giving everyone for a Christmas gift. People buy for the whole family because it works for them, right? So to me, the best way to bring the adoption is to make people feel better, right? And that's all we do, is make people feel better, and they become our ambassador. So if I get one person to do it here, guess what happens? By then, they'll have a whole family do it, and they'll talk to their neighbors about it. And when they go on dinner, they say, I can't have broccoli. Why? Well, haven't you heard of bio? I mean, literally, that's what happens. People say, oh, did you know that food may not be good for you?
When I think of adoption, though, I also think about...
There's somebody on that side. Yes? Have you tried this on children? Yes. Even though we don't, the children, parents have to accept the, terms and conditions. And the earliest, and in fact, the earlier do, the better it is, because the children's gut, if you can fix them when they are young, they actually grow up to be very healthy adults.
Do you incorporate proteolytic enzymes in your biome company? The enzymes that break down unwanted proteins like your arteries and endometrial cells?
So we, again, our stuff in the supplements consist of everything from vitamin, mineral, herbs, digestive enzymes, amino acids, probiotics, prebiotics, and all of them are combined. So we do look at all of this stuff. In fact, most people have this idea that red meat causes people to have heart disease. In fact, that is just not true. The choline in the red meat actually gets digested by the microbiome, and it produces something called TMA, trimethylamine. That gets absorbed in our blood, and our liver converts them into something called TMAO, trimethylamine oxide. That is what causes the plaque in the artery. So if your microbes are not producing TMA, you can eat all the red meat in the world you want. And in fact, you and I probably know some people who lived in the Midwest to be 100 years, and they ate red meat every day and never had heart disease, right? So it's not about particular food being bad or good. It is about, is it good for you or bad for you? So there is no such thing as universal healthy food. However, there are some universal unhealthy food like sugar, right? And I want to say simple sugar is really bad for you, but complex sugar is extremely good for you. So all the oligosaccharides, which are complex sugar, are extremely good for you. In fact, when the child is born, the first few days of the mother's milk, breast milk, is nothing but oligosaccharide. Imagine that. That oligosaccharide cannot be digested by humans. Can only be digested by the microbiome in the gut. So imagine what nature is telling you, that I just created an offspring, and that offspring can only be healthy when I don't feed the baby, but feed them. The microbes need to be nurtured because they create our immune system. They are the one who are telling our immune system what's good, what's bad, what are the friends, what are the foes. And that is really the relationship we build. And that's the reason if you have a natural birth, that's the first exposure you get to the microbiome is when the baby is going through birth canal. Unfortunately, when babies are born through C-section, you get skin microbiome and the other microbiome that you get from the operating room rather than from the birth canal. And those children in general will end up having a lot more allergies and a lot more types of things that normally a baby that's born naturally wouldn't have. Terry, looks to me we have 7 minutes and 30 seconds and no question.
Can I ask mine now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just piggybacking on his question, the gentleman over here on adoption.
Yeah.
Adoption is also governed by affordability.
It's true.
And you look at the food in the grocery store, and the most affordable is the worst food for you.
Yeah.
My handful of supplements is at least $200 a month. So, and I understand if it's customized, it's less. How do you, if you're going to help 7 billion folks, how do you tackle the issue of affordability?
Very good question. So we sell our kits at cost. So about 3 or 4 years ago, our cost was $999, and that's what we sold the kits for. Our cost came down about 2 years ago down to $499. We sold our kits at $499. They came down to $299. We sold them $299. Our gut test now sells for $149. That's our cost. So why do we do that? Because from our purposes, the data that we actually now understand what causing people to have diseases could actually disrupt the whole industry. For us to be able to detect cancer, to be able to detect every other disease, and to be able to find cures for them. And that is a win for us. So we're not trying to make money from consumers to keep them healthy. We're trying to actually go out and look up the further stream to disrupt the pharma industry so that we can take the money from them and cure something. Because they're making $100 billion. Even if I make 5, that's plenty for me, and as long as I get 95 out of them.
That's great.
Right. And so our costs are coming down, and that cost will continue to come down, by the way. We just, in fact, last month we were talking to our scientists and said they were able to reduce the cost by another 30%, and they will implement them in the next 3 to 4 months. And when the 30% reduction happens, you will see our gut intelligence goes down to $99. Right. So our hope is that there's another technology we are working on, microfluidics, and that will take about 2 years. And when that happens, our cost will be down to under $10. Right. And that is literally what we are doing, is to continue to get the cost down. And our supplement cost will come down because we're completely building a new ways of doing the robotics. And as our costs will come down, we'll continue to reduce our costs down. And we do make money on supplements, so don't get me wrong. I'm not going to lie to you. Say that is actually where we do make some profit on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more question right here.
Yeah, just it seems that there are certain communities who would benefit, a lot.
Yeah.
Are you marketing or targeting certain of those communities who are kind of plagued by some of these diseases? Also, potentially, some of those communities also have affordability issues.
That's what I was going to say. Unfortunately, the people who are going to benefit the most are the people who can't afford the least, right? And my recommendation, my request to you will be, anybody who is in this room, has a family office, want to support it, help us. Say, look, we're going to take 10,000 kits and we're going to donate it to the communities that can't afford it, and we will give them to you at cost. And so to me, that's the best way of doing it, is to help us get to the people who need it the most. So if you have it in your heart and want to help, please, get these things in the hands of people who can't afford them. And as our costs continue to come down, we'll continue to reduce that for everyone. Yes, ma'am.
What about exercise? Is that something that you're planning to incorporate into this product line?
So there are 4 things you need to do to stay healthy. Number 1 is the nutrition. If your body doesn't have the nutrition, nothing else is going to do the trick, right? Once you get the nutrition, right nutrition in the body, then there are 3 things you should do: exercise, sleep, and stress reduction, right? That means whether it is a meditation, whether it is whatever it is, or quitting the damn job so you don't have stress on your thing, finding something that you don't have a bitchy box, right? Whatever it is, but reduce the damn, or sometimes leaving the damn spouse if that's hard. That's the one that's causing you the most stress.
Look at that. We're almost out of time. We do just have a couple more minutes, maybe time for one more question. Right over here.
Yeah, so, people who have existing cancers, one of the interesting thing is, by the way, there is a lot of research that immunotherapy and chemotherapy is governed through your gut microbiome. So if you were to just Google the gut microbiome and immunotherapy, you see very interesting research. They did the immunotherapy on these patients, and immunotherapy works about 30% of the time, so about 70% of the time it doesn't. And they took the people where immunotherapy did not work, and they simply did the microbiome transplant. In other words, basically fecal transplant. They took a poop from a healthy person, gave it to the person, and suddenly the immunotherapy started working. Just simply changing the gut microbiome. Last week they published a research, and albeit it was on mice. They took a poop from old mice, gave it to the young mice, and young mice start showing the symptoms of old age. And they took the poop from a young mice, gave it to the old mice, and the old mice actually became younger. Right? So imagine someday your gold is going to be your poop. Healthy poop may be the gold.
Right before cocktails and hors d'oeuvres.
So if you want to invest in a Bitcoin, you might want to invest in somebody's poop. It might be just as good.
Well, this has been a treat. I hope it has to all of you as well. Are you going to stick around and sign some books?
Absolutely.
Really appreciate that. One of my favorite quotes of yours, and you mentioned it earlier, success is not about how much money we have in the bank, but it's about how many lives we have impacted through it. Success is experienced when we do things which have never been done before. So Naveen and Anu, on behalf of all of us, thank you for sharing with us today, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you very much.
That was awesome, sir. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everybody. Turn this on. I want to thank everybody for coming. It's been a great afternoon. Thanks for spending it with us. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for our great marketing team, Julia, Tara, and all the other. Let's give a round of applause for all the marketing people and setup team. Thank you. We put a QR code. If you wouldn't mind scanning that on your phone, that's going to be that's going to give us more information about what you might be looking for in upcoming wealth management summits from us. That'll help us figure out how we can make sure we're achieving all the needs. So thank you so much. Thank you, Terry and Lori Baldavia, Assured Partners, Parsion Wealth Management. These guys are great partners for us, and they're consistent and have done a great job for our clients. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg.